Chapter 823. No matter the time, the external neuron's movements were always at the forefront of Luo Nan's mind. Now it was even more sensitive. Even though the reaction of a true god and the state of the horned demon were worth pondering, Luo Nan still temporarily withdrew his thoughts from the wilderness. He focused on the virtual brain interface and quickly scanned it twice. There was clearly a prompt response, but there was no definite information. Luo Nan rarely saw this sort of situation. He did not dare to be negligent. He examined the virtual brain interface with all his concentration. He hated that he could not search the central region where the myriad stars converged. Fortunately, he had not reached this stage yet. He was able to capture the source of the change. It was one of the two large satellites in the periphery of the central virtual brain galaxy. It was the outer space flying ship that had always been in a state of isolation. Since there was nothing to dig up, Luo Nan had subconsciously overlooked it in the past. But ever since he officially came into contact with the abyss world, aside from the extreme structure of balance between order and chaos and the corresponding backlash power, the thing that gave Luo Nan the deepest impression was the solitary floating in the periphery of the abyss. It seemed as if the flying ship could collapse at any time. One was inside and one was outside. One was far and one was near. But the impression it gave others was carved from the same mold. Luo Nan could not help but suspect that there was a close relationship between the two. Right now, the outer space flying ship was still in a state of isolation. It was far from comparable to the exoskeleton armor on the other side. But when Luo Nan focused his thoughts and observed carefully, the flying ship, which had always been in an unreadable state, lit up a certain region in the middle of the ship's hull. The specks of light there were distributed in chunks. There was a dizzying effect, but it was more transparent. The light from the inside of the flying ship seeped out. It was as if the facilities and equipment in that region had been connected to an energy source. The program had been activated, and it began to hum and operate. Luo Nan's thoughts probed over, and they really did enter. The unreadable state of the outer space flying ship became history. It opened up certain privileges to Luo Nan. When Luo Nan's thoughts cut in, they were limited to the electrified region. There were no more obstructions. He could feel a large amount of precise and complex structures. It was as if it truly existed. It was a high-end ship that could travel in space. It was just that it was in a mini form. And it was precisely because it was mini, that the degree of precision of certain regions had exceeded the precision limits of Luo Nan's mental perception under the situation of being shrunk proportionally. It was as if a layer of dense fog was wrapped around it, making it hard to see too clearly. In this indescribably tiny space, in this state of precision and fuzziness, there was a piece of equipment. It was being displayed on the bright screen. There was a display interface on the device, on which an extremely tiny trajectory module was flashing. It looked familiar. Luo Nan pushed his microscopic perception to the limit, and he finally recognized it. Wasn't this the offline test he had just passed not long ago? Wasn't this the scalp-numbing and complicated management cockpit interface? Luo Nan would be able to recognize it even if it had shrunk by 100 or 1,000 times. The interface flashed silently. It was still in a relatively simple initial stage, and it seemed to be inviting him to enter again. Luo Nan really did cast his telepathy over, but the result he obtained was system loading external data, offline testing function maintenance. External information? Was it referring to external information like soul magnetization? Was it an established process, or was there some kind of stimulation? It was most likely the latter. Luo Nan recalled the contents of the flash of inspiration when he fought with a true god. Of course, there was also the earlier process of offline testing, the information input process that helped him solve his problems. They all came from the precipitated information of the alter spiderweb, but in the end, they still came from the abyss world. The external neuron didn't refuse anything. Or perhaps this was its method of analyzing information from the abyss world? Luo Nan could basically determine the close relationship between the external neuron and the airship at the edge of the abyss, from the external neuron's internal and external reflections, from the sending and receiving modes of the signal waves. But he still needed to observe the relationship between Team 1 and the abyss world. At the very least, he needed to see what kind of changes would occur after the so-called functional maintenance. Returning to a more realistic level, Luo Nan thought about the subtle evaluation he had obtained and the high probability of his low flying score. Frankly speaking, he was a bit unconvinced. If he could do it all over again, that would be pretty good. Basically, Luo Nan viewed this change as a positive trend. All that was left was to wait. He let out a breath, and his thoughts returned to the wasteland. The horned demon, who had just been cleansed by the soul magnetization, stood there quietly. It was no longer insane, but it was like a wooden stake. It was as if it had become an empty shell. Had it been formatted? Luo Nan imitated it and used the soul magnetization technique. He really didn't know what the consequences would be. He probingly entered the mental plane of the horned demon and felt the activity of its thoughts. It wasn't a dried-up well, a pool of stagnant water, nor was it a chaotic state where true and false were confused. Instead, it had a fixed rule and a certain rhythm. It was just in the process of germinating anew and integrating anew. It wasn't just the mental plane. There were some changes and adjustments to its fleshly body. In particular, the area where it had been pierced by the true God's sunlight blade. The cell activity was intense, manifesting itself more clearly. Luo Nan didn't know what would become of it in the end. He had to wait for this. But first, he needed to make some arrangements. It was quite scary to just stand there blankly. The battle with the true God just now was short, but it was still quite eye-catching. Luo Nan had already ascertained the situation of the surrounding 100 square kilometers. The few people who had been ejected from the laboratory were all distributed in this area. Perhaps there were some among them who were interested in chasing after him. Speaking of which, Luo Yuan should have left. In the corresponding position, there was only a pile of rotten flesh that was rapidly losing its vitality. And President Wan. Everyone was quite close to each other. Luo Nan did not forget that the reason why his telepathic thoughts had returned to the 70-format laboratory was because of Dean Wan. It was because the wording was highly similar to Dean Wan's cultivation theories. It was related to the lamination interference technique. Maybe he should go up and talk to them? Luo Nan shook his head and opened his personal mailbox. There was a letter that had just been sent. The sender was a bit unfamiliar, but with his grasp of the surrounding wilderness, he naturally knew the true source. Even if he didn't know, he would definitely be able to guess it based on the special words used. This was a set of complex coordinates. It involved the dual positioning of the material plane and the mental plane, and it was described with the unique theoretical logic of the 10,000 towers. Were it not for the fact that Luo Nan often communicated and discussed with him, Luo Nan would have been confused for a while. But right now, Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. Then he let out a sigh of relief. At the end of the day, President Wan was a friend. But how was he supposed to reply? Luo Nan would feel disgusted if he were to play dumb and make a fuss about nothing, asking how these coordinates came about. But if he were to seamlessly connect the dots and go straight to the main topic, some things would be too troublesome to explain. Since this was the case, Luo Nan pulled up the information on the lamination interference technique from the virtual brain system. He did a rough scan and opened up the virtual work area over at Ban City. He earnestly used the secret symbol and began a laborious translation. Dean Wan would certainly be very interested in this information. To return a plum with a peach, everything was left unsaid. Of course there were difficulties in translating. Sometimes he could understand it, but when it was reduced to words, the words wouldn't be able to convey the meaning. He would have to ponder over it endlessly. Luo Nan decided to work through the night in one spurt of energy. Enla had Luo Nan arrange 3 tasks for her. She was so busy that her feet didn't even touch the ground. Only Snake Tongue served her by her side. The habits of humans were very terrifying. Unconsciously, she had already gotten used to having someone serve her by her side, and Snake Tongue was the best. Luo Nan remembered that he still needed her to help him with his experiments before. But due to the accident in the laboratory in the wilderness, he had to fly several thousand kilometers away and fight back. But now, he still needed her. At the very least, he could refer to her at any time with the yarn of invisibility. Wouldn't he gain more inspiration? Time had no sense of existence in the face of concentration. Soon, it was midnight. Enla came back from her business to greet Luo Nan, but Luo Nan chased her off to rest. The lighting in the bedroom interweaved with the lighting in the virtual work area. They were all automatically adjusted to the most suitable and stable state. It seemed that they were going to continue like this forever. But at this time, muffled thunder sounded in the night sky of Ban City. Howling winds came at the same time. The wind was quite strong. Even though the yacht had already anchored into the harbor, it still trembled slightly. This was the omen of an impending storm. Snake Tongue, who had been massaging Luo Nan's shoulders, subconsciously took a deep breath. She didn't know why, but her chest felt a bit stuffy. Luo Nan's movements paused before she could think deeply. He laughed. A true god has returned. He seems to be in a terrible mood. Snake Tongue's mind was in a muddled state for an instant, but she immediately became alert. She made a quick and sharp connection. Is the Amaterasu Order preparing to restart the project? Who knows? Luo Nan blurted out without thinking. He lowered his head and continued his translation work. Snake Tongue's gaze focused on Luo Nan's face. In the end, she lowered her eyelids and continued with her work. Her technique was the same as before. As for what state her mind was in, only she herself knew. No, the Lord beside him must have known as well. Time passed bit by bit. Dark thunder rumbled in Ban City. Dense clouds prevented rain, and the air grew more and more stuffy and dry. Snake Tongue obviously couldn't feel it inside the yacht, but her spirituality was clearly being suppressed and affected on the mental plane. According to the logic of Luo Nan's words, this was most likely the influence of a true god. Snake Tongue had been in Ban City for many years. She couldn't say that she wasn't used to strange sights, but she still had the ability to accept them. It was just that she was affected by the actions of the Amaterasu Order 2 days ago. It was hard to avoid some divergent considerations. Georgia Wayman was probably shivering in fear. Luo Nan's voice suddenly cut into her ear. What's the temperament of a true god like? You've been in Ban City for so many years. Do you have some understanding? He's temperamental. He has an explosive temper. If he's a god, then he must be a very vile one. Snake Tongue quickly reacted. She made her own conclusion and evaluation. He's quite in tune with the atmosphere of the divine path in Ban City. Luo Nan burst out in laughter. Snake Tongue still had a sharp and sinister temperament deep in her bones. His curiosity was piqued, and he asked in passing. What about me? My lord? Yes. What about me? Snake Tongue didn't find this strange. Luo Nan had faintly placed himself on par with a true god's mentality. It was just that this so-called evaluation was close at hand. It would inevitably bring about all sorts of problems. She had no choice but to consider it. After several seconds of silence, Snake Tongue smiled and said, "From what I see, my lord really isn't gentle." The language of humans was truly marvelous. Snake Tongue clearly deviated on purpose with craftiness, but it involved the flow of dispersing on the mental plane. She went from a pool of stagnant water to a winding stream in a jungle. The complexity and subtlety of her emotions actually exceeded the scope of Luo Nan's understanding. Luo Nan couldn't figure it out for a time. He thought deeper and felt that it was ridiculous. He simply dispelled these distracting thoughts and responded faintly. "Then I'm really sorry." He no longer spoke with snake tongue. He focused on his translation work once more. It was another sleepless night. Chapter 824. Old Hand did not go to the factory today, saying that he was not feeling well. He stayed at home to give himself some time to catch his breath. In fact, his body was indeed slightly injured. Diving 180 meters deep into the water and staying there for a long time, even with the support of his equipment, was too harsh for an old man. He leaned on the sofa, but he was not idle from time to time. His fingers were constantly moving in the virtual workspace, drawing the foundation structure that was formed or not. Shelter, this was a good thing, but the situation outside was very tense. The Soul Order, which had been developing in a low-key manner, suddenly became the target of everyone's curses, and for such an absurd reason. Even from afar, the veteran could smell the scent of a conspiracy. Not to mention whether the Soul Order was innocent or not, how could such a job be passed down? How to learn? It was all a matter of brain power. Some people, once dead, would throw difficult problems at him. His wristband vibrated, and a call came in. Seeing the caller ID, Old Hand raised his head, but quickly picked up. "Hello, Secretary Ian." "Yes, I'm not in the factory. Do you want to continue? Looking for a studio? Looking for me? President Okupenrong-san can definitely recommend better than me. Hehe, I'm not a professional. But if Mr. Mo insists, I can indeed help from a technical point of view. Come over to pick me up? There's no need, right? Alright, I won't stand on ceremony." After the short call ended, Old Hand scratched his gray and white hair. He could not help but wonder, does the Blood Flame Order want to break through from me? Where did I get the face to do so? In any case, Mr. Mo was still quite respectful. Even that arrogant female secretary called him Master Show the next day. Her attitude was very proper. Old Hand fell for it. What was more troublesome was that he had been looking for people too frequently in the past 2 days. His own rhythm had been completely disrupted. Alright, stop the research. Although death is a big deal, life has to continue. Brother, just wait a little longer. Old Hand had seen many life and death situations in the wilderness. Although he did not have a heart of stone, he could still take it easy. He erased all the graphics he had copied and studied in the virtual workspace, tidied up a little, and prepared to deal with it again when he went out. As he was about to leave, he remembered something and dialed a number. 10 seconds later, the other party picked up. The voice was hoarse and tired. "Uncle Shou? Xiao Jiang, did you stay up late again?" "It's okay, I'm used to it." "Uncle Shou, speak." "Oh, I see." The veteran briefly explained the conversation and asked, "I think that Mr. Mo's attitude is pretty good. It seems like he's sincere about acquiring the company. Today, you said you're looking for a studio, but I think it's just an excuse. You still want to talk to us. You're our leader. Why don't we take this opportunity to meet? I'm just here in name to make things easier for everyone. I won't be participating in the specifics. Uncle Shou, you can make the decision." Little Zhang's voice was soft but firm. In the end, she reminded him again, "Of course it's good if we can negotiate, but if we can't, there's no need to force it. After all, Bansheng is xenophobic, and the trade market is not a good place. We've already crossed the ocean to get here. Why should we care so much?" The veteran was open-minded. The infected people are still resources. They won't be cleared out so quickly, but they won't let go so easily either. Since we've come to Bansheng, we probably won't be able to return within a generation. It's good to have a foundation to let everyone settle down. A soft sigh came from the other side. "Uncle Shou, thank you for your trouble. I should be the one thanking you. At this age, I don't have to worry about anything, but I can't help but take care of those bottles and cans, old and young. I can't do it, and it's all thanks to you. Uncle Sho. I said it a long time ago, this is to repay my conscience. Forget it, let's not talk about this. How are things on your side? Has the ownership of the laboratory been decided? Not yet. LRCF has been asking for a long time to buy it all together. It's been more than half a year, and they still haven't come to an agreement. Are they waiting for the Great Zay Church to collapse so that they can directly collect the trash? From a long-term legal perspective, LRCF's current investment and funding model will be less troublesome. But if there is a clear direction and we try to advance the project faster, it will be more efficient to integrate. I really want to know their direction, but looking at the situation in Bancheng, if we wait a little longer, collecting trash might also be a good business. Veteran laughed out loud, but in the end, he couldn't laugh anymore. Bancheng was in turmoil, and ordinary people like them, especially the living assets, who were detained on this piece of land, wouldn't have an easy time. Jiang Zhong was right, the peaceful trade market wasn't a good place. To put it bluntly, buying property here was just to create a beautiful bubble, to comfort the people. The call ended. Veteran sighed, patted his clothes, and went out. During the day, the peaceful trade market was centered around the trading center, and the prosperity radiated outwards, gradually decreasing. When he arrived at Veteran's Nest in Linshan, it was already very quiet. Most of the people went to work or to do business, and the entire residential area seemed empty, which was more in line with the traditional style of Bancheng. Veteran stood on the side of the street, waiting for Secretary Yin to come over. He was old, and he didn't have a good rest last night, so he couldn't help but yawn again. At this time, from the corner of his eye, he saw a high-end black MPV approaching from the opposite side of the street. In this residential area, there were fewer such vehicles, so he thought it was Secretary Yin's car, so he turned his head and took a few more glances. At this time, he received another call. I'm on the side of the road, and I saw. Hey, you guys haven't arrived yet? No, don't worry, I saw wrong. Oh, yes, it's here. As he spoke, the black MPV that he had mistaken for slowly drove past him. Coincidentally, a similar black MPV drove over from the corner of the street a little further away, and the two cars passed each other on the relatively narrow street. Later, this car stopped next to Veteran. Yinla deliberately got out of the car to formally greet Veteran, and helped him open the door of the main compartment. Veteran saw Mr. Mo smiling at him from inside the compartment, and his wheelchair was placed next to him. Previously, Secretary Yin didn't mention that her boss was also coming over. Unexpectedly, the Veteran was a little overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. If one was unaccountably solicitous, one would definitely have ulterior motives. Could it be used here? Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind, but he didn't delay. He bent over to get into the car, and said with a smile, "You guys are too polite. It's what I should do." Mr. Mo invited Veteran to sit next to him in the guest seat, and said in a soft voice, "I'm going to stay in Ban City for a while, but my mind isn't idle. It's very important for me to have a suitable workshop to try some things out. I'm very grateful that Master Sho can help me. You're too kind. If you don't find it to your liking, please don't be angry." Mr. Mo smiled again. His smile rarely had the sophistication of an adult, but it made his face, which didn't show much of his age, look even younger. Veteran couldn't figure out what kind of person this person was, and what kind of personality he had. In any case, he was a professional. Veteran had seen many businessmen, but he had never seen someone like Mr. Mo, who entered the factory as soon as he came, and found a workshop to do experiments within 2 days. Yinlu also got into the car and sat in the front passenger seat. She turned her head and asked Veteran, "Master Sho, where should we go first?" how about going to Jitakucho to pick up someone? I have an apprentice who used to work in customer service, but now he's in business. He's more familiar with the market than I am. Of course. The car started again. Mr. M.O. looked through the window and sized up the street. Master Show's residence is very quiet, but it's a bit remote. How's the peace trade market? Well, I can only say it's okay. You also know that there are a lot of immigrants here. We vagrants from the wilderness, as well as modified humans, can't have a get-together every day. I see. Mr. M.O., if you're more concerned about this, I'll take it into consideration. In fact, as long as it's a good workshop that can be rented, it's filled with expensive things, and the location is quite particular. Mr. M.O. smiled and didn't say anything. The car drove away from the street. And just half a minute later, another black commercial car that had just driven past Veteran's place turned around and came back. This car looked like a business car on the outside, but the space inside was stingy and full of equipment and personnel. Only the main and front passenger seats were spacious. At this moment, the man with a crew cut in the front passenger seat was giving orders. Team 3, go in. Follow Supervisor Bai's instructions and do a good job. Don't rummage around like you're doing a forced search. We haven't reached that stage yet. As a frontline commander, his instructions were too long, and his lazy attitude had already affected his subordinates. Someone asked, Captain Jimmy, how long will that stage take? Go ask our beautiful Supervisor Bai. Captain Jimmy watched as the members of Team 3 sneaked into the suspect, Veteran's house and put down the intercom. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned his head, his gaze stopping at the back half of the main car. Perhaps you can also ask our Honorable Mr. Neo. Come, use your brain and contribute a little more to the real world. At the end of Captain Jimmy's line of sight was a man in a hospital gown. His body was perfectly straight, but in fact, he was firmly confined by magnetic rings. At the same time, 7 or 8 tubes of different thicknesses were inserted into his mouth, nostrils, and even the skin on the back of his neck. They went up to his brain, and the ends were connected to the equipment on the side. This Mr. Neo had a blank expression, but the various electric signals extracted from his body formed a rather effective stream of information. A large number of blurry and shaky images were displayed in a specific projection area. There were some relatively clear figures inside, and they were constantly changing, including Veteran. Chapter 825. The middleman that Veteran introduced to Mr. M.O. was a young man named Wooly. He had a dark complexion and was as thin as a stick. At first glance, he looked like someone who was malnourished or a long-term drug addict. However, his eyes were bright, his steps were light, and his mind was fast. He only communicated with Mr. M.O. for a few times before he figured out Mr. M.O.'s pulse. Although the workplace he chose was not satisfactory, it was still quite good. In more than an hour, they had gone to 3 locations. Mr. M.O. did not feel annoyed, at least on the surface. Next was the 4th location. Veteran had joined in the fun earlier, but he gradually felt sorry. He pulled Wooly to the side and whispered in his ear, "Do you have any idea? He is not good at walking. You can't do anything from top to bottom." Wooly grinned, "Master, Mr. M.O. has a beautiful secretary to serve him. What is there to do? What he needs, however, should be a high-end, well-equipped place that is quiet and able to withstand the torment. He is an expert. Practicality is the most important thing. Master, you are an old man. You have never fought a rich battle in your life. Moreover, you are a technician, and he is a boss. Your way of thinking is definitely different. I think Mr. Mo entered the workplace because he wants more inspiration. He doesn't care about the form or the process. In short, he was a money-burning boss." Wooly did not finish his words, but Veteran saw through him. He scratched the back of Wu Li's head, telling him to restrain himself. It was not right to say that Wu Li was cheating. He just kept hinting that there was a better choice than this one. He took advantage of Mr. Mo's high requirements for equipment and insensitivity to price, and raised his psychological threshold bit by bit to enjoy a higher premium. After getting back into the business car, Veteran apologized on behalf of Wu Li. Although Mr. Mo did not say anything, it was good to make it clear in advance. Moreover, Veteran vaguely felt that Mr. Mo was a person with clear eyes and a clear heart. His disciples' thoughts might not be hidden from him, but Mr. Mo was magnanimous and did not care. The more it was like this, the more he had to lower his attitude. Mr. Mo laughed, "It's okay. I don't care about going to a few more locations. I just want to find a suitable working environment to deal with technical problems. You can say that I am looking for inspiration." Wu Li, who was in the back seat, immediately hid his head in the waist of his trousers. The Veteran turned around and glared at him. But judging from Mr. Mo's expression, he really didn't care. Mr. Mo really knows what he's doing, and he's standing at a higher position than us. He's also more knowledgeable, and he's a person who needs to expand. He said with a smile. "No, for now, I'm only doing some technical conversion work. Whether it's looking for a workshop or buying a factory, it's all in service of this goal." "I see." It was true that he was looking for a private workshop today, but it would be too pretentious to say that he didn't want to talk about the acquisition at all. The Veteran took the opportunity to add some weight to his side. "Let's not talk about anything else. Half of the people in the factory came from the wilderness of the old continent. They've been with me since they were young. They've also been through wind and rain. They're different from those cowardly Osaka people who only know how to dawdle. I brought it from the wilderness. It's direct and durable. Strong hands-on ability." Wu Li tried to make up for his mistake by concluding at the end. "Top-notch material processing. I've seen it." Mr. Mo was referring to the visit to the factory the night before yesterday. The Veteran didn't want to mention that because the young lads in the assembly workshop used some of the techniques of the shelter to form a highly effective synergy. The infiltration and death of the miner made him know that the situation outside was tense, so he didn't want to complicate things. Also, he's smart. Wu Li is a bit off topic. In fact, a really smart person should learn the craft honestly. Wu Li had long been trained to be thick-skinned. He only pretended to be a little embarrassed, and then he followed his master and echoed, "The senior and junior brothers in the factory are really smart. Let's not talk about anything else. In the normal trade market, our sub-database questions have the highest adoption rate." Huh? Mr. Mo didn't know what was going on. At this time, Inlu, who was sitting in the passenger seat, turned around and explained, "The sub-database questions that Wu Li mentioned should be referring to the external questions of the credit rating system of the Vagrant Exchange, right?" "Yes, yes." Wu Li nodded like he was pounding garlic. Mr. Mo seemed to understand a bit. "Is it the credit rating system that rewards activation points? So it turns out that the above question banks can be accessed externally?" The Veteran was slightly startled. These words sounded a bit childish. He subconsciously lowered his judgment of Mr. Mo's age by a level. Wu Li didn't think too much about the latter part. He took out a simple tablet from his bag and directly handed it over, swiped the question board. "Many of our designs are on it. Our factory takes up nearly 20 of the top 100 pre-database questions." Luo Nan took the so-called swipe the question board. The endless stream of new toys made him feel that it was getting harder and harder to maintain his persona as Mr. Mo. Right now, it was time for Inlu to play her role. She explained the background knowledge to Luo Nan. The normal trade market of Ban City was essentially a blood-sucking market built on the periphery of the Vagrant Exchange. It was a place where the large amount of black goods circulating in the Vagrant Exchange were legally laundered. The two formed a concentric structure. The inner vagrant exchange still strictly adhered to its internal rules. Only black market currency was circulated. There was only an official exchange rate that could be exchanged with all sorts of currencies in the outside world. For example, credits from the secular world, honor points from the inner world, and so on. But the normal trade market on the periphery provided a variety of forms. It bypassed the vagrant exchange channel to realize a more flexible and convenient transaction mode. One was relatively fixed, while the other fluctuated rapidly. The exchange itself was a benefit. Plus, this place was an important transfer base for the raw materials of marine aberrations. There was also a half-black half-white experimental base for infected aberrations. Naturally, this place became an important source of income for the government of Ban City. It was also the best place to launder large amounts of money. And the black market currency was an important leverage. It was in high demand. Many specialized professions and products revolved around this. The Swipe the Question board was one of them. Due to the vagrant exchange's credit rating system, it gave every participant the opportunity to obtain a certain amount of black market currency for free. Many people relied on the system to swipe questions, unceasingly increasing their level and evaluation. They obtained black market currency to exchange. But every time they logged into the system, it was a test. If they failed the test again and again, their evaluation would be damaged. So some people thought of an idea. They used the method of ants moving houses to gradually transfer the credit test question bank out. They integrated it into the so-called Swipe the Question board to be used for daily practice. Although the questions in the question bank were as vast as the sea, there were always traces to follow for each profession. If they swiped a few times, they would have a bit of an impression of each question. Then, with a bit of luck, it was possible to jump 2 or 3 levels above their actual level. The higher the level, the more privileges one could enjoy in the vagrant exchange. In a certain sense, it wasn't something that could be measured by a few points. They're persuading people to make progress by swiping questions. Luo Nan gasped in amazement at the imagination of the people of Ban City. But what the hell was the external question bank and the advanced question bank? Chapter 826. An external question bank. Ian Lee's subsequent explanation was a bit more conservative. It said that the rating system's designer, or perhaps its maintainer, made this arrangement in order to expand the question bank. It allows users to create their own questions. Through a certain evaluation and filtering mechanism, questions that don't belong to the original question bank will be absorbed. Luo Nan asked curiously, "I've never seen this function before." Since it's an external question bank, it's not within the original system. It's an independent data center that connects to the vagrant exchanges of every major city through cloud technology. It also sets up sub-banks. If the standard of the sub-bank's questions is high, then it's possible to be selected into the main bank and obtain higher profits. Luo Nan shook his head. It's this complicated? That's why it's a bullshit external question bank. On the other side, Old Han chuckled coldly. Originally, it was a simple and practical training rating system. Now it's forcefully turned into a scam. Inlo originally wanted to say something, but she was interrupted by Old Han, so she didn't say anything more. On the other side, Wooly pursed his lips. "Master, the official trading application has a self-creation function. How is it a scam? Also, we've relied on this to earn over 100 points in the past few years. We've also exchanged quite a few resources. It's not a small supplement." On Old Han's side, his anger flared up. He glared fiercely. "Bullshit, Abu. Pooh. It's true. We all crawled out from the wilderness. How come I don't know of any big shots who have mixed themselves into the officials? Also, do you know what big data is? It's just a tiny bit of profit. You've taken away all your treasures, and you're even happily helping others count their money. No way. We're just playing around. We shouldn't have put it up. We can probably hold on to it. Wooly was already a bit weak in the latter half of the conversation. His unpromising appearance made Old Hand even more angry. He casually slapped Wooly's forehead. This kid Wooly and the other children under him were good at everything. They only cared about the small profits in front of them. It wasn't that they couldn't see things clearly. They simply didn't have any ambition. It was hard not to be a bit sad in the midst of his anger. Most of these young people had grown up holed up in Band City for a few years. They were immigrants in name, but in reality, they were prisoners and even experimental subjects. How could they possibly have any ambitions? Not taking revenge on society was already a sign of pure nature. Luo Nan's gaze swept across this master and disciple pair. He didn't try to mediate the fight. He just lowered his head to size up the question board interface. The initial interface was just 2 sets of boxes and color blocks to choose from. It seriously lacked a sense of design, and it was almost identical to the system interface in Spring City. It could be considered one of the most simple ones he had seen in recent years. The other was the 100-year sequence test interface. It was this simple interface that formed a sharp contrast with the rich content. Luo Nan chose the direction of mechanical design, which he had tried before. What followed was different from last time. There was an additional level, and there were 3 options on top of it: combat simulation, unlimited questions, and browse index. He could roughly guess the meaning. Luo Nan first switched to the index interface. He had a general understanding of the question bank structure. Then he chose the infinite swipe question mode. He let the questions in the question bank appear one after another in the form of a waterfall. The operation was designed to be immersive. Regardless of whether the question was being answered or not, it could be switched infinitely. There was also a drop-down function, which was considered more user-friendly. Luo Nan casually switched to the questions on the swipe question board. He looked as he evaluated. His foundation in mechanical design was laid down by worker Zhai. He was more academic, and his design ideas were influenced by the virtual brain system. He used configuration thinking as a key link, and he had a myriad of experiences. Overall, his design was quite high-end. Now that he didn't have the pressure of a test, it was easier to form an overall impression by quickly browsing through the question bank. The questions on the swipe question board were clearly divided into 2 types. One type was the questions from the original question bank, or the questions that were similar in style. Regardless of the difficulty, they were relatively rigorous. They also tended to be practical. Some were even relatively old-fashioned. As for the other type, thanks to the creator of the swipe question board, there was a built-in ranking and filtering function. Luo Nan adjusted it to the premium recommendation level. Only then did he feel that the questions that appeared weren't as painful to the eyes. Luo Nan hurriedly flipped through a few pages before he finally gave his evaluation: deviant, difficult, dangerous, strange, very eye-catching, but very interesting. Old Hand had just freed himself from his complex emotions when he gave Luo Nan a thumbs up. His meaning was that Luo Nan had hit the nail on the head. Luo Nan smiled at him. These newly created questions on the swipe question board, even if they were of an extremely high level, weren't necessarily rigorous. They were more imaginative and bold. And the mode of setting questions for others to do carried a certain sense of flaunting. This way, the train of thought of the person who set the questions would be exposed more clearly. What was being tested, what was being hidden, what was being flaunted, and what was the core of the questions could be discerned with a single glance. Luo Nan swept his gaze over and felt that he had a basic understanding of the overall style of mechanical design in Band City. If he were to ponder deeply and extract a few processing techniques, it wouldn't be a problem. Oh, if he were to expand the scope, he removed the restriction of mechanical design and the amount of information suddenly exploded. Within the domain of the vagrant exchange, there were still topics related to distortion, alteration, biochemistry, and even supernatural powers. They were more common. Luo Nan even had the misconception that he was now an expert in the study of marine distortion species around Ban City. From hunting and gathering, to processing and processing, to design and manufacture, to practical use, all sorts of information was available. This was simply a database of distortion species in a region. Ban City was like this. If it was as Enlo said, then the 88 large metropolitan areas of the world were like this. Luo Nan understood Old Hand's meaning. Only an idiot would let go of such a rich resource of information. Speaking of which, Luo Nan seemed to have heard someone mention something similar before. He had some memories of this in his mind. Luo Nan couldn't recall it for a while, but he didn't force it. He switched the page to the ranking list of physics and specifically asked Old Hand, "Who are they?" Wooly blinked his eyes at his master and pointed them out to Luo Nan one by one with excitement. Hengduan 7 tribes. Your unified logo? Luo Nan keenly discovered that the people who came up with the questions that Wooly was referring to all wore this logo after their IDs were verified. You could say that. Wooly grinned. His mood was clearly affected. It was Old Hand who explained, the tribe used to be mainly active in the vicinity of the Hengduan mountain range. After they moved to Ban City, they were divided into this order. The Hengduan mountain range. Near Spring City? Luo Nan suddenly asked. Old Hand chuckled, I've stayed in the vicinity before. But it's normal for the tribe to move back and forth. They've been to the basin, they've been to the plateau. There's no set number. Luo Nan went, oh. He didn't continue to get entangled on this topic. He decided to go through the dozens of self-created questions on the ranking list in more detail. During this time, the car had already reached its destination. Luo Nan didn't care. In any case, he didn't even need to move a finger. Enlo could serve him comfortably. Wooly winked at his master again and received another slap from Old Hand. This time, it was a slap to the back of his head. Wooly grimaced and moved to the front of Luo Nan's wheelchair. He cleared his throat and began to introduce the workshop and its surrounding environment. This used to be a small-scale Frost River Reality branch store. I quite like to come here to play. But after 2 years, it couldn't hold on any longer, so I sold it. I partitioned it into a professional workshop like this one and rented it out. Many manufacturers do their after-sales maintenance here. Of course, most of the goods sold in the trade market aren't consumer goods. There are very few idle people here. It can be considered a quiet place amidst the noise. Frost River Reality. Luo Nan raised his gaze from the question board. He seemed to be deep in thought. It's rare for a Frost River Reality branch store to not be able to continue operating in the world. It was rare for Enlo to express her opinion. It was probably because of her previous experience as an executive of Frost River Reality's flagship store. Wooly responded with a chuckle, in the end, the trade district isn't the CBD. Everyone is working during the day. It's normal for them to work at night. Adults who trade their lives for money, who would have the leisure to come here every day? Plus, the machines are easy to break, and the fees are crazy expensive. Old Hand glared at him, you guys fight here every day. You think you're in the right. Get to the point. Luo Nan had just woken up from his daze. The familiar feeling from before should be from Frost River Reality. Indeed, it should be from one of the games. He turned to look at Enlo. Your previous project, 10 Days in the Wilderness, should have the corresponding data to support it. Enlo was startled for a moment before she said, definitely. A large-scale reality game like 10 Days in the Wilderness requires a massive amount of real-world data. She understood Luo Nan's meaning when she spoke to this point. She turned to smile at Wooly, maybe you guys contributed to it. Wooly was embarrassed and speechless. That's right. The virtual reality technology of the Frost River waterway was able to perfectly integrate into the archetype format's training mode. This made Luo Nan very amazed, but he was also very unwilling to accept it. He had once asked Yuan for some understanding. The specific details were a bit blurry. He only remembered the gist of it. According to what she said, there were many major powers from all over the world that were providing technical support for the Frost River Reality project. In terms of big data, all sorts of channels were used to collect real-time information from all over the world. They were transmitted, updated, categorized, analyzed, and processed at all times. The question board was small, and the questions were intermingled with good and bad ones. But as long as they were collected online, with the support of enormous computing power and algorithms, large amounts of unstructured and semi-structured data could be effectively organized. A considerable portion of the data could even be reintegrated into a complete data model and be fully utilized. The Frost River Waterway was a virtual reality game. It was developed by many parties, and there were military and political forces involved. This was the root of the game. Humanity's counterattack against the mutants on all fronts in recent years was absolutely not due to the appearance of the Deep Blue platform. This was an enormous and orderly accumulation. It was an inevitable process from quantitative change to qualitative change. There was no doubt that this information was not free. It was more or less in the hands of several powers. Through complex cross-licensing, limited and page sharing was realized. How salivating, Luo Nan sighed. Suddenly, the external neuron began to tremble. A pop-up window popped up on the virtual brain interface. Do you want to import? Chapter 827. The external neuron had been very active for the past 2 days. Perhaps the negligible increase in privileges brought about some changes after the confirmation and review process was initiated? Reality proved that Luo Nan's guess was correct. He could see from the detailed information that the Heaven Stairway Level 4 knowledge access privileges allowed him to carry out the operation of importing external data, complementing and perfecting the offline database. If he confirmed that the data was not available in the main database, he would receive some rewards. It was possible to increase his privilege rating. Of course, this would have to wait until he connected to the so-called Heaven Abyss network and established a link with the main database. Perhaps this function was something like an information hunter? Right now, he could only be considered a librarian. Data was easy to deal with, but the matter of connecting to the internet was too far away. Luo Nan did not hope to rely on it to increase his privileges in the short term. However, the virtual brain system was the basic function of the database. It would also process the imported data, providing analysis, integration, modeling, and other application services. If he was able to experience the big data application technology of the mysterious alien civilization, then this trip would not be a loss. Luo Nan immediately clicked yes. He wanted to see what the result would be. However, the system immediately refreshed with new information, coldly shattering his wishful thinking. The system is loading external data. It is in in-depth analysis mode. Cannot be interrupted. Non-homologous data will automatically enter the next sequence. Fine, you're the boss. Luo Nan laughed in spite of himself. He was not in a hurry. But his thoughts turned, and he discovered that some of the characters were quite familiar. It seemed to be the influence of the offline test. The external neuron seemed to be far from being able to completely absorb the information of the abyss world that he had deposited through the altar's spiderweb. This was his own fault. He had to obediently accept it. Oh, wait a moment. Luo Nan's mind suddenly bypassed a subtle point. Speaking of which, when he passed the offline test, he had raised the single privilege of a knowledge access. Only then could he have the function of importing external data. Before this, the external deity's data system, which was connected to his magical energy, was more or less in a read-only state. Then, during the offline test, he had relied on the information deposited through the altar's spiderweb to pass the test. Wasn't the experience of the instantaneous increase in power equivalent to a cheat sheet? In essence, he had copied the reference answer from the database he controlled. This answer was rooted in the Abyss world. Thinking about it this way, the relationship between the Abyss world, the external neuron, and Luo Nan himself was quite subtle. No matter what, the data had to be imported. What Luo Nan wanted wasn't just to brush the pitiful 100 or so gigabytes of data on the question board. He wanted to dig deeper. Not only did he want to dig up the data in Band City, but he also wanted to dig up all the major data centers in the world if he had the chance. He wanted to see which was better, the priceless data storage and processing system or the external neuron. Stones from other mountains can be used to improve jade. Luo Nan had to admit that this idea was quite shameless. However, he still hoped that he could use this method to sort out the information he had accumulated during this period of time and come up with a clearer context. It must be known that Luo Nan's soul cloak could be found all over the world. It was an extremely high-end data collection system, but it was limited by his own brainpower. It did not possess the ability to conduct in-depth analysis and calculation. He could only rely on the external neuron's built-in applications, such as the assembly interface, to conduct filtering. As the external neuron's built-in database was too high-end and not down-to-earth, many of them were not suitable for Earth's existing environment. In particular, the processing capabilities were seriously unmatched, and most of the plans given were impractical. Under these circumstances, Luo Nan urgently wanted to know what the result would be if he were to combine the virtual brain system with Earth's real data, as well as the precipitated information from the Abyss world. But it was useless for him to be anxious right now. He could only obediently line up. "Mr. Amo, what do you think?" "Huh? This place. Not bad." Most of Luo Nan's thoughts had shifted to the virtual brain system. He didn't pay much attention to Wu Li's explanation of the reality plane. But after 3 rounds of grinding, Wu Li, this clever devil, had basically grasped Luo Nan's context. He had more or less calculated the corresponding premium. The workshop introduced this time was already very close to Luo Nan's needs. Luo Nan had more or less understood this point before he got off the car. He had come to find the veteran today. He wanted to find a suitable workshop to research the lamination interference technique and the corresponding creation techniques. This was indeed one of the most important reasons. But there was another reason. He wanted to go a step further in communicating with the veteran. He wanted to establish a natural and close relationship with this former vagrant of the wilderness who seemed to be old friends with his father, mother, and grandfather. The current trend was pretty good, but there was still a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, Luo Nan didn't focus the conversation on the workshop. Instead, he waved the question board in his hand. "I just looked at it. The self-created questions on it have very solid fundamentals. Some of the ideas are quite brilliant. If these are able to represent the true level of the technicians under Master Show, then it's quite decent. Of course. If it weren't for Master teaching us to keep a low profile, then it wouldn't be a problem for us to dominate the rankings." Wu Li could already see the intent of cooperation in the veteran's heart after getting along for so long. He advocated with even more vigor, making it easier for him to take the initiative in future negotiations. Luo Nan just smiled. He didn't respond to Wu Li's words at all. He just said to the veteran, "I've only skimmed through the external question bank of Band City. It seems that the regional characteristics are quite strong. I've also seen the feasibility study report that Secretary Yin gave me. In the area surrounding Band City, the manufacturing and processing of mutant materials, even if it's high-end products, are basically made from the surrounding marine mutant species. The coverage is a bit smaller. It should be due to the limitations of raw materials. It could be said that Mr. Mo is an expert. The veteran glared at Wooly and grinned. He made a circle with his thumb and index finger. Frogs at the bottom of a well can only see the sky this big. These kids think that they're awesome just by pondering a few products. I hope you don't mind my words, Mr. Mo. Luo Nan really didn't mind. He laughed and said, "It's nothing." The veteran's words were followed by words. He also added gold to his kids, but it's just like you said, Mr. Mo. Their fundamentals are quite solid. They're also much younger than me. They accept new things very quickly. The business in T-City actually has quite a bit of commonality. Luo Nan shook his head. It's not like that. Huh? Luo Nan handed the already useless question board back to Wooly. Wooly received it like an idiot. Right now Luo Nan was sitting in a wheelchair. He was shorter than everyone present, but he grasped the rhythm of the entire scene. He even grasped everyone's mentality. Actually, Secretary Ian knows the best. The acquisition of a processing plant isn't necessarily a large business. The most direct goal is to serve me personally. Personally? The veteran still didn't quite understand Luo Nan's meaning. Luo Nan explained to him very patiently, I used to lean towards theoretical research and the mental side. Even though I've learned a few things on and off in terms of design and processing, my practical ability is quite poor. If I want to produce results in a short period of time, I need a high-level technical team to help me realize some of my designs. This is the main goal of my acquisition of the processing plant. Right now, even Ian Lu was very surprised, let alone the veteran and Wooly. She was mostly baffled as to why the boss was so sincere to the veteran and the others. Wooly glanced at his master and did what a rash young kid should do. He opened his mouth and said, Mr. Mo. Even though I don't work in the factory, I know that there are over 100 people in the day's factory. There are 2 production lines and the annual production value is several hundred million. There has been a steady income these past few years. If what you mean is that you want to pile everyone into the workshop and let them handle those thoughts for you. This isn't too appropriate, right? The veteran coughed heavily. He was reprimanding his own disciple for being rude, but his ears perked up even more. The factory is a place to train people. Luo Nan wasn't angry at all. He continued to explain patiently, the master who taught me mechanical design theory once said that designers who haven't gone to the assembly line to polish themselves can basically be viewed as defective products. I am one of them. It's just that I have self-awareness. I don't want to let this shortcoming continue to be magnified. That's why I need Master Show and the experienced technical team under you to provide support and supplement. The veteran couldn't be bothered to be polite at this time. He directly asked, Mr. Mo, what you're saying is that you're acquiring the factory mainly for the skilled technical workers in the factory. The operation is secondary. That's a matter for professionals to handle. I believe that Secretary Ian will provide me with experienced management personnel. And you, as shareholders, will certainly have your own considerations. Luo Nan didn't pretend at all. He directly came to a conclusion, from my perspective, it's really just a matter of paying attention to people. The veteran's heart sank. This was a situation he had never considered before. It was a direction he found very hard to accept. The reason why he jointly acquired the Day's Society's processing plant was to find a temporary industry for the men, women, old, and young of the tribe. Therefore, no matter what, the processing plant must be run well. It must be continued as stably as possible. Under these circumstances, how could he find a partner who didn't have the intention to run the plant diligently? The veteran's brows furrowed tightly. Luo Nan didn't seem to notice. He continued to speak, minding his own business. According to my standards, the level you've displayed so far, including the production line and the whiteboard, are all decent. But they're not good enough. After all, I hope that the products you can bring out aren't limited to just deep diving. Therefore, if we continue to cooperate, Master Show, your team, especially the technical personnel, will need to further broaden their horizons. In short, you can't stick to this one place, Ban City. You need to go out for further training, to receive tempering. Training? Going out for training. Wu Li's voice suddenly rose by an octave. The veteran was a bit stupefied. He subconsciously locked gazes with his own apprentice, wanting to confirm this information. Going out for training? Leaving Ban City? At this moment, the veteran and Wu Li could clearly hear each other's thumping heartbeats. Chapter 828. D City, Spring City, Xia City, G City. Even Luoyang City on the other side of the ocean. As long as it can help me improve, I can consider it. Luo Nan blurted out the names of the cities he was more familiar with. Objectively speaking, there was a suspicion of exaggeration. However, when it came to expression and speech, this kind of parallelism was definitely very effective. Not to mention that Yinluo was helping him. Though Yinluo didn't understand why Luo Nan didn't communicate with her beforehand and suddenly said this, one of her duties as a secretary was to support her boss. She began to rack her brain from the moment Luo Nan brought up this topic. She keenly grasped the opportunity to cut into the topic, taking advantage of the situation to supplement and perfect it. The Castle Financial Group has always had a system of commissioned students. They have cooperated with many famous schools, enterprises, and even the military all over the world. We are happy to give talents with potential a chance to improve further. Of course, we need to sign a training agreement that is in line with the interests of both parties and in accordance with the law. The length of service must also be extended accordingly. That would be more reasonable, more realistic. Veteran Hand and 5 centimeters were breathing heavily, but they didn't even realize it. Mr. Mo's gentle voice continued to seep into their ears and minds. Wei Peisheng is an existing system. If you're interested, you can ask Secretary Yin about it. I have no one to speak of. I don't expect everyone on Master Show's side to be talented, but as long as 1 or 2 of them can meet my requirements and be of use to me, I will have achieved my investment goal. The veteran felt that he could no longer hold on. The various worries and barriers in his heart instantly cracked under the plan that the other party seemed to have prepared for a long time. It was just a matter of blowing a breath away from complete collapse. However, Mr. Mo stopped here and returned to the nominal topic of the day. This is it. I'm very satisfied. What procedures do I need to go through if I want to rent it? I'll go get it done. I'll go get it done. Wu Li felt as if he had just woken up from a dream under the illumination of Luo Nan's gaze. He went to contact the service staff in a flurry. Seizing this opportunity, Veteran Han deeply adjusted his breathing and calmed down the pain that was hard to control because he had struck his ribs. He also felt joy that was almost uncontrollable. At the very least, it was a form of hope. If the young people in the tribe could take advantage of this cooperation to escape from this cage and live openly under the sun, all the joint venture purchases would not be an obstacle. Right now, the biggest problem was the disparity between the other party's plan and their status as mutants. Mr. Mo's plan was an idealized operation based on technology. He was indeed very capable, but could he break the tacit understanding and agreement between Sakura City, LRCF, and even the major forces in the world? Or to put it more bluntly, was he willing to touch this taboo? Rationally, the veteran was still pessimistic. But no matter what, the other party at least came up with a plan, giving them a glimmer of hope. The veteran could no longer remain calm. Should he talk to Mr. Mo now and tell him about the restrictions they were under? Or should he immerse himself in hope for a while longer before facing the cruel reality? While the conversation in the workshop continued, another black MPV in the trade market ended its several-hour-long cruise and returned to an independent warehouse not far from the dock. During this period of time, the originally empty warehouse had been transformed into a simple command center. The warehouse space of nearly 1,000 square meters still seemed a little empty after filling in all kinds of equipment and people, but, soon, this place will be filled up. Captain Jimmy jumped out of the car. Behind him, his subordinates were carefully unloading the most important asset in the car, Mr. Neo, who had a tube inserted into the back of his head. The direct goal of the few hours of cruise was to stimulate the memory of Neo, who had been to the trade market before, and to stir up more information from the depths of his brain. With the dual effects of brainwave interference and reading equipment, the results were remarkable. At least, Captain Jimmy was already relatively satisfied. The captive captured on the night of the 7th had exchanged almost everything in a day's time. The only pity was that this guy did not know about the latest structure of the shelter. But it didn't matter. The core council of the Soul Church in the Deep Blue World had already been destroyed. The struggles of these stray dogs did not affect the overall situation. He arrived at the intelligence analysis platform. The positions of a dozen or so important people had already been anchored here. With the help of the SCA's authority system and the existing monitoring equipment in the trade market, they were being tracked throughout the entire process. For some special people, Jimmy had even arranged for a small fry. Wei Pei Sheng and the like are already in place. The voice of Mr. Mo was clearly reproduced in the command center, causing Captain Jimmy to sneer. Veteran Shoshiong was the clearest in Neo's memory, and it seemed that he was also one of the most important contacts. Of course, he had to be given special treatment, and the two investors from the Blood Flame Order were also put under surveillance. The movements of the group of 4 over the past 2 hours were all displayed on the 3D map of the trade market. Their every move was also immediately reproduced under the care of specially arranged monitoring and imaging equipment. Captain Jimmy swept his gaze over the slightly blurry and fake restored image, and turned to the middle-aged man in a suit beside him. Minister O'Hara, I remember that Shoshiong and the others are restricted personnel? Can the SCA confirm this? Minister O'Hara grinned and tried his best to maintain a professional attitude. Yes, we've marked it very clearly. Shoshiong and the other members of the Hengduan 7 have social rights limited to a radius of 300 kilometers with the trade market as the center, and there are other restrictions in the city. Then, the so-called Wei Pei Sheng is just a glib talker. Minister O'Hara answered without hesitation. Of course, although their relocation to Ban City is a social security action of the Star Alliance Committee, they are also restricted by the regulations of special groups, and they have signed an official agreement. If they violate the regulations and the agreement, they must pay the full cost of the treatment and infection suppression over the years, as well as pay a hefty penalty fee. Captain Jimmy touched the stubble on the top of his head and sneered. Ignoring this kind of problem, the first thing he says is Wei Pei and training. This Mr. Mo is also a person who speaks irresponsibly. Have you found any information on him? The intelligence officer raised his hand. We're currently contacting T-City, there's no need. We can't find this person in the SCA's database, so it's definitely a fake identity. But with Lu, the deputy priestess, endorsing him, his position in the Blood Flame Order must be impressive. Maybe he's a spy arranged by Mrs. Halder. Forget it, it's about time. Let's close the net. Huh. As for the evidence. There are so many people, we can clean them up with a little trick. Are we really going to treat this as a police case? Minister O'Hara, who worked in the SCA in Ban City and was a senior civil servant, pretended not to hear anything. However, his deputy next to him was a little worried. Now? Isn't it a little early? Also, capturing a few hundred people is too big of a movement. Without the cooperation of the local military and police, we can't do it. That's why we have to act during the day. Most of them are on the production line, so it's easier to catch them than at night. As for cooperation, of course we have to cooperate. Lord Dayuan, I'm counting on you. Minister O'Hara failed to pretend to be deaf. His face was stiff, and he forced a smile. The illegal order is a cancer, and we can work hard to get rid of it as soon as possible. We are very willing to cooperate, but Captain Jimmy, in the information you provided, it was also mentioned that the peaceful trade market is in a special area in Band City. With my authority, I can't mobilize enough police here. In fact, the SCA needs to coordinate with the police again. Don't worry about coordination. Don't we have Supervisor Bai? She's been hanging out with that guy from the Yuchuan family for the past 2 days, so she can help. Captain Jimmy grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Pack up all the information we've collected and send it over. If there are any problems that need to be solved, tell her and ask for instructions from her. I heard that at the end of last year, because she didn't take a vacation, her performance was deducted completely. If she wants to turn things around this year, she'll definitely be more proactive than us. As he spoke, the intelligence officer in charge of organizing the data had already obeyed his order and sent out the corresponding information. Captain Jimmy smiled in satisfaction and temporarily left the intelligence analysis platform. As he walked, he cracked his neck, and the joints of his neck bones creaked. There was also the sound of special metal being stretched, and only he could feel the subtle vibrations. He wasn't worried about any big movements. The dynamo core had already been updated to the 7th generation, and it had pushed him to complete a complete transformation. He was the first batch of Deep Blue Walkers to complete this kind of change. Even Tian Bang, who had made a name for himself last year and was known as the #1 person below the extraordinaries, had only just begun testing the 6th generation of products. Thanks to Professor Luo, if it wasn't for his cage theory, the experimental reality wouldn't have been able to complete the new generation of products so quickly. Right now, he couldn't wait to test it out in real combat. Even though he might not even need to do anything against this motley crew. From the warehouse, he could vaguely see the upper deck of the luxurious yacht from the distant pier. Investors of the Blood Flame Order? It would be fine if they were tactful, but if they were stubborn enough to get involved, he didn't mind using this order, which was going downhill, as a sacrificial target. Captain, Supervisor Bai's orders. Captain Jimmy snapped his fingers. Okay, get ready. Captain. The intelligence officer's voice was somewhat hoarse. Wait a moment, Supervisor Bai has refused to authorize us. Captain Jimmy suddenly turned around. What kind of joke is this? Chapter 829. Supervisor Bai, regarding the arrest operation, I hope you can give me a clearer instruction. Captain Jimmy felt that his authority as a leader had been seriously challenged after making a fool of himself in front of his subordinates. He immediately called Bai Xinyan and taunted her back in a seemingly polite but actually forceful manner. The response from the other side was very flat. Then, you can rest here and continue monitoring if you have nothing to do. The only thing you are not allowed to do is make any arrests. Do you understand? What was with this unusually arrogant attitude? Captain Jimmy did not care about his tone. He had never taken Bai Xinyan seriously in the past. Today, he was unexpectedly hit with a stick. Now that he had to respond, the other party's attitude was like adding fuel to the fire. He unconsciously raised his voice. Reason? Overall judgment. What a good reason. Captain Jimmy could no longer maintain his polite facade. The only thing that drove him to continue speaking was the long distance that his fists could not reach. He could only smash his fist against the wall of the warehouse and explain his reason through gritted teeth. From Neo, we can confirm that there are missionaries from the Soul Cult who have made contact with the nomads of the 7 tribes and are preaching. The fish that slipped through the net 2 nights ago has most likely re-established contact with them. That person is an important person who has control of the shelter's new core configuration. If we allow him to spread this configuration and allow the Soul Cult to rise from the ashes, who among us can bear the responsibility? The configuration is only a standard, there are no secrets. As for the Soul Cult, as long as they use this method to preach, they are destined to lose everything. Bai Xinyan was still calm and collected. She did not mind debating with Captain Jimmy. As long as we know the people involved, it doesn't matter if it's the new version or the old version. It's not difficult for us to analyze it. As long as we can decipher it, with the characteristics of the shelter, the faster it spreads, the greater the harvest will be. Why not? Of course, I'm just saying this casually. Currently, the situation in Ban City is very complicated. There are a few people with strong influence and leadership who are not emotionally stable. I don't want a problem that could have been easily solved to become a problem because of someone's violent style. How about this explanation? Captain Jimmy's head was about to explode from anger. You directly pointed out names. Don't you feel tired of beating around the bush? Bai Xinyan's low chuckle came through the communicator. This is indeed a problem of understanding. Of course, there are some small taboos. As the commanding officer of the operation team who has undergone strict training, you should have this basic quality. Captain Jimmy, you can come up with a new plan and report it to me according to the procedures. I will make a fair judgment. Please believe in my basic qualities. Manners my ass. The true god of the Amaterasu cult is a big shot, but does he need you to flatter him in such a roundabout way? The corner of Captain Jimmy's eye twitched. If they were face to face, he might just throw a punch at them and walk away. But if he took the initiative to hang up now, things would be even more difficult to solve. Damn it, it's better to be in charge than a county magistrate. When he was sent to Ban City to carry out a mission, he didn't expect that he would be defeated by a woman who was only a manager in name. It shouldn't be. Bai Xinyan was indeed a manager appointed by Quantum Corporation. She also had a very strong relationship with the Deep Blue Laboratory. Rumor had it that she was Wang Yu's lover. But this wasn't a reason for her to overrule the judgment of the frontline commander. Jimmy and his operation team originally belonged directly to the Deep Blue Laboratory. But when they were experimenting with the 7th generation Dynamo Core, their affiliation was transferred to the Apocalypse Laboratory. Between the two labs in Deep Blue World, no matter how one looked at it, Apocalypse had the upper hand over Deep Blue. Even if Captain Jimmy was just a new subordinate with a shallow foundation, there was no need for him to suffer by Xinyan's vexation. After a momentary clash of thoughts, one side gained the absolute upper hand. Captain Jimmy gritted his teeth. I will stand by my position and judgment on this matter. I will also report it to the laboratory. When the time comes, I will ask Manager Bai to communicate with Manager Yen. Who? That light and even disdainful tone clearly had nothing to do with the question. Captain Jimmy choked and couldn't speak anymore. If he said anything more, he would only be humiliating himself. Not only that, but his superior and backer would also be implicated. The terrible atmosphere of the call finally collapsed, and Captain Jimmy almost crushed his communicator. With a gloomy face, he paced around the corner of the warehouse a few times. Several times, he wanted to make a long-distance call, but in the end, he didn't choose such a lowly way to complain. In the end, he chose to use the form of a short message. After considering a few words that could barely be considered objective, he described the situation here and sent it to the other side. 5 minutes later, there was a buzzing sound, and the other side replied to the message. The sender was Yen Yongbua. The message was very short. Watch the show first. Captain Jimmy had followed this person for more than half a year, and he knew that this true superior of his wasn't referring to Bai Xinyan, nor was he referring to Bai Xinyan. Instead, he was referring to the greatest pleasure he had been looking forward to recently. It was a show of coercion and bribery led by capitalists in the vast Pacific Ocean. So far, the stage had not even been moved yet. With the attitude of the superiors on both sides, what else could Captain Jimmy do? He wanted to curse, but he forcefully pushed his emotions back down into his stomach under the gazes of the people around him. The special metal on the back of his neck seemed to be ringing, but this time it was irritating and uncomfortable. It even seemed to make his neck and shoulders ache. Captain Jimmy patted the back of his neck and ground his teeth. He stomped heavily on the ground and returned to the intelligence station. The operation will be cancelled for now, but keep a close eye on these people. Not a single one can be missed. The intelligence clerk didn't want to talk too much, but there was something he needed to ask. The 2 people from the Blood Flame Order. How should we deal with them? Captain Jimmy's dark face exuded a bit of green. He stared at the clerk with a look that made it seem as if he wanted to eat him up. But in the end, he only spat out 2 words from between his teeth. Keep an eye on them. The clouds that had been stifling for over 10 hours finally condensed into droplets of water in the middle of the afternoon. It began to rain with a pitter-patter. Inla held up an umbrella as she escorted Luo Nan back to the yacht. Snake Tongue welcomed him respectfully and helped Luo Nan change into his casual home clothes. Then she said, "My lord, it seems that there are people in the vicinity of the pier who harbor evil intentions towards us." Snake Tongue knew that Luo Nan's mental senses were sharper than hers, but as a member left behind, it was her duty to report problems. Luo Nan went, "Oh." He was disinclined to put on an expression. "Just keep an eye on them. Everyone keep an eye on them. They probably won't start fighting for a while." Yes. 3 hours had passed since the short-term rental agreement was finalized. During this time, Luo Nan stayed in his rented workshop to familiarize himself with the equipment. He drafted an experimental plan according to the relevant circumstances. How to integrate the high-end technology and high-end requirements of the mysterious alien civilization with the reality of Earth's environment. This difficult problem consumed a large amount of his brain cells. It made him lazy and somewhat unable to lift his spirits. However, he still attached great importance to the group of people in the warehouse at the pier. Especially the leader. The structure of his body and soul was very valuable for research. Unfortunately, the current environment of Ban City was complicated. Everyone was afraid to take action, so Luo Nan needed to keep a low profile as much as possible. Sometimes he couldn't keep a low profile. At the very least, he needed to learn to feign ignorance. Luo Nan had just learned this. At this time, Inla delivered the latest information she had gathered. It was related to the Hengduan 7 tribes. It was also the so-called restricted residence situation in Ban City. Luo Nan skimmed through it twice before putting it down. Inla had already explained the specific information and sensitive points to him. He wasn't a person of the law. He didn't need to consider too many minor details when solving problems. In short, in order to smoothly implement the Wei-Pei student system, Ban City won't let people go. Is that right? It's not just Ban City. Ever since every major city enacted vagrant laws one after another to guide vagrants back, a pattern has been formed on how to deal with people infected with abnormalities. It is an established rule that is tacitly agreed upon by the entire world. There were some words that Inla didn't mind, but she had no choice but to say it again. "Mister, with your status and identity, most likely no one will go against your wishes. But if you use a system to replace the established rules, then the nature will be different." Luo Nan went, "Oh." He didn't say anything else. He seemed to be pondering, but he also seemed to be lost in thought. Half a minute later, the virtual work area in front of him suddenly opened. Inla was too close, so she was hit by the projected light. She hurriedly moved to the side. But she saw that the work area was displaying the psychic diagram of the deep sea from yesterday morning. Needless to say, this was yet another leap of thought that she couldn't understand. Luo Nan's hand casually streaked across the image of the deep sea. Finally, his fingertip stopped at the corner of the image, where the only light was. "I've dealt with the matter of mutated infections before. I was quite nervous at the time. It seemed that if I wasn't able to control it, it could turn into a disaster like Resident Evil. But now it looks like everyone already has a set rule. Do you have the specific data on the number of people infected with abnormalities in the entire world? You're saying the number of people, living together and scattered, treatment control, death. Luo Nan spoke without thinking, and Enlu understood. I will collect comprehensive data and report it to you. His fingertips continued to move across the psychic diagram. Luo Nan had the impulse to continue modifying, refining, and completing the diagram, but he controlled this impulse. This was because he knew that it wasn't time yet. He was still lacking in maturity. The infected with abnormalities, the deep blue world, the soul cult. I have to look at everything together. Enlu instantly discovered that she had accepted an extremely thorny task. But at the same time, this was perhaps the first task she had accepted. It was a task that truly suited her identity as Boss Luo's secretary. She took a deep breath and bowed once more to show her seriousness. Chapter 8:30. My memories of that time have always been blurry, and I have been brooding over it. Back then, that experience was like a divine revelation. It was an easy harvest. It made me, a backpacker who had always been restless, to the point that I took the initiative to venture into the wilderness, wild with joy. As time passed and my understanding of the divine revelation deepened, it easily became a burden. Knowledge and energy are completely different. The latter can be transformed in many forms, but knowledge itself shouldn't have fallen from the sky. It shouldn't have been forcefully stuffed into one's memories. I don't like the reason divine revelation. I want it to have a process of cognition, understanding, and digestion. This is more in line with the value of this knowledge itself. Therefore, I traced back, hoping to be able to straighten out the entire vein. Dean Wan was a person with a story. Luo Nan read Dean Wan's reply and felt rather moved by some of the passages. This was the first time he knew that Dean Wan's exquisite and profound creation law system was obtained in such a way. Inevitably, Luo Nan had a few relevant and reasonable conjectures regarding the source of this system. Dean Wan most likely thought the same. Therefore, he was very interested in the information released by the Horned Demon about the Wilderness Laboratory. He didn't have to travel 1,000 miles to investigate. In the past, Luo Nan and Dean Wan had a friendly relationship, but it wasn't to the point of confiding in each other. However, Luo Nan's translation of the lamination interference technique had a powerful catalytic effect. It had indeed achieved the effect that Luo Nan hoped for. Everything is understood without words. But with the temperament of the two, they wouldn't talk too deeply about this problem. In fact, this was only a small portion of Dean Wan's series of replies. It was a sudden sigh. The main content was still deciphering the material. The lamination interference dynamo core technique is my favorite type. There aren't many mechanics, and there are few assumptions. It is established on the basis of sufficient observation and material collection. It excavates the existing laws of the world, as well as positive interactions with humans. Show them and use them. The world is material in the end. Its ultimate form of expression is material. It requires material products to serve as proof. The author of the article has shown us the exquisite transformation from one material form to another material form. There are many illusions in the world that confuse the senses, but this is not one of them. This is a flow process that changes at will. Every link can stand up to scrutiny, showing the absolute beauty of the eternal change of the material world. When people were awed by this beauty, the author had achieved his goal. The biggest limitation of using this technology comes from ourselves. Whether we have the ability to understand and reproduce its aesthetics, as well as the material basis to match the aesthetics, Dean Wan was full of praise for the information on the stacking interference technology, and some of it was even sublimated to the point of poetry. However, most of it was still the analysis of the specific content, which was basically a careful reading of word by word. The various flaws of Luo Nan's forceful translation were undoubtedly exposed under this sort of study. He was forced to constantly rework, checking for loopholes and filling in the gaps. Only then was he able to resist Dean Wan's powerful and strict logic. However, Luo Nan obtained even more. A lot of experience, calculations, and speculations were no longer limited to the lamination interference technology itself, but included the reflection of Director Wan's entire knowledge structure. All of this was presented in front of them through the text, graphics, and even the content of the demonstration sent back by President Wan. It was impossible for all of this to be transmitted all at once. In fact, this was already the sixth wave of feedback that Luo Nan had received. It was a vast book of over 100,000 words, but it was only a cursory reading of the entire material and a small part of it. With Dean Wan's help, Luo Nan was able to read very thoroughly, even though he had only read a small portion of the material. He had basically grasped the core concept of this material. The intricate structure design had been deciphered almost perfectly. Only the most important part, as well as the most important part, was the processing, both the material and Dean Wan liked to call it the creation stage. It was here that he encountered the same old problem as before. The processing environment and requirements of the mysterious extraterrestrial civilization were far superior. The disparity with the simple and crude conditions of Earth formed a barrier that was hard to surmount for a time. In the past, Luo Nan could only completely rely on the virtual brain system when he encountered this sort of thing. He followed the calculations of its intelligence to reduce, and reduce again until he could bear it. The exoskeleton laid with the electromagnetic muscle membrane structure was the product of this subtraction, and it was also the final plan that could only be realized after the God-binding hoop and the biological reactor were two hard goods. But this time, neither Luo Nan nor Dean Wan had any intentions of compromising. They didn't consider creating a high-end psychic core product in a short amount of time, but they didn't want to make do with it. They just researched and pondered bit by bit, starting from the core concept that was already relatively clear. They first did subtraction, then they did addition. They saw if they could find a winding and complicated path that would allow them to bypass this obstacle in the end. We need to start from configuration design. The greater the material conditions, the greater the changes in configuration design. The lamination interference technology is a mature plan. Even though there are restrictions here and there, it is already close to being a public product. We can basically confirm that it can be used by the majority of people at the corresponding level. But we don't need to consider this situation. First, we can make a private version that meets certain conditions. Perhaps this will be closer to the author's original design. This was Dean Wan's train of thought. It was indeed very reasonable. Then the core responsibility of changing the design was pressed onto Luo Nan's shoulders. This wasn't cheating. Dean Wan believed that Luo Nan's level of configuration design was far above his own. Luo Nan was the best and most suitable choice in the world. As for Luo Nan, even though he communicated with Dean Wan and asked for help from the Wan court, he wasn't willing to let someone else handle this important link. After all, this was something that belonged to him and his family. He had always believed this. Since a consensus was reached, another round of research had arrived. There is a fundamental difference between imitation and plagiarism. Being able to design and being able to do it are two different things. It's an excellent train of thought, but these problems appeared when I repeated it. The problem with the secondary structure needs to be explained clearly. I don't understand it, and I think it's too complicated. It doesn't conform to the refinement and elegance of the design itself. My opinion is. Back and forth discussions, learning, borrowing, and even debates and quarrels took up the majority of Luo Nan's time. Well, no quarrels were more painful than quarrels. Luo Nan and Dean Wan did not use instant messaging tools in order to guarantee the security and privacy of the data and communications. Instead, they used the psychic wave network of the Xia City branch to conduct encrypted mail transmissions. The more restricted the communication, the more the two sides needed to rack their brains. They needed to thoroughly research the issues raised by the other side, and then transcribe a sufficiently persuasive reason. It was very difficult to mix emotional things into this. It needed to be rigorous and thorough, or else it would just be a waste of an opportunity to communicate. It would delay the progress of both sides. From Luo Nan's perspective, this was a novel feeling that he rarely experienced. There were some aspects of thinking that he might never be able to touch, but they were cornerstone-like existences to Dean Wan. The enormous gap between priority and backwardness would inevitably lead to conflict. In the end, it was possible to reach an agreement. It was possible for both sides to compromise, but it was also possible for them to shelve it. But even so, the efficiency was still increasing. There was a qualitative difference between one person and two people. The pleasant surprise of having an outstanding answer placed in front of one's eyes as soon as one opened one's eyes was extremely refreshing. Luo Nan would not slack off because of this. He hoped that Dean Wan felt the same way. Use your strengths. Be anxious for my needs. Be more realistic. Be more pragmatic. I still have to walk the mental side. The most malleable thing in the body and soul framework is soul strength. Dean Wan's brain was a lump of wood. It seems that I can do a bit of work with the structure of space and time. This kind of structure is very ambiguous in the virtual brain system. It is considered to be on the material side, but there is also a core of the mental side. Combining the strengths of the two is a bit interesting. Luo Nan muttered to Dean Wan and the principles he set himself as he continued the design process. The virtual work area had complex configuration lines, but what flashed through his mind was only 10 times, 100 times more. He had inspiration. He just persevered in searching for the most suitable one. This was the image of Mr. Mo that Veteran saw when he came in. There was no greeting. Perhaps Mr. Mo didn't discover his arrival at all. Or perhaps Mr. Mo didn't have any intention of diverting his attention. Veteran Han didn't get angry. Miraculously, Luo Nan's nagging, chanting sutras unconsciously eased his stomach full of grievances and oppressiveness. He stabilized the moving frame that he had pushed over and found a chair in the workshop. He rested for a while, not opening his mouth. He just let Luo Nan continue to chant. He was very familiar with this scene. In the past, when he was pondering over designs and repairing things in the wilderness, it was basically like this when he encountered a difficult problem. How could there be such a peaceful environment back then? On the plateau and in the mountains, the howling of the wind and the roars of beasts could be heard from time to time. There were even the sounds of explosions and fighting. They disturbed him all the time. In those times, only talking to himself and forming a domain could help him concentrate his mind until he entered a state of high concentration. This sort of situation practically disappeared after arriving in Ban City. Even if he researched some things, his goal wasn't as pure as it was back then. It must be the beautifying effect of his memories. Veteran never cared to beautify his past experiences. But as he grew older, he couldn't help but reminisce about them. Occasionally, he would dream about them in the middle of the night, and it was as if he had returned to the wilderness where life and death swayed. He even often thought about it. If only he could have died a happy death back then. That would certainly be the most perfect ending. A sudden vibration from his wrist interrupted his thoughts at this time. It seemed to affect the rhythm and atmosphere of the room. Luo Nan's gaze shifted from behind the workbench. His brows furrowed. Chapter 831. The wristband vibrated silently, but it created an abnormal effect. For a moment, the veteran felt that his face was a little numb. He didn't know if it was because of Mr. Mo's piercing gaze. He hurriedly tried to turn it off, but it was too late. The veteran could only smile awkwardly. He first nodded to apologize to Mr. Mo, then looked at the contact person. Soon, his old face sank. It was that bastard occupant Rongsan. The anger in his heart burst out again, but he didn't want to disturb Mr. Mo, so he got up and walked out. When he was about to go out, he finally couldn't help but say stiffly, "If it's still the same words, there's no need to talk anymore." He really didn't talk for long. In less than 2 minutes, he turned back from outside the house. At this time, he saw Mr. Mo standing in front of the mobile shelf he brought, looking at the hanging exoskeleton frame, and rubbing it with his hands to test it. The rough skeleton on the shelf was really a skeleton. It was called an exoskeleton, but it wasn't the time to design the appearance yet. Everything was simple. It was just bones pieced together in various ways. Just looking at the details, it was good craftsmanship, but looking at the whole thing, it didn't look like it. The main material of the assembled bones was an amphibious mutant called Ox Demon in Band City. Yes, it was made from the prototype of the mutant dark dragon god wilderness spirit, worshipped by the Great Zay cult. It was also ironic that the processing plant where the veteran worked belonged to the Great Zay society controlled by the Great Zay cult, but in this factory, the most representative source of high-end processing materials was the Ox Demon. A considerable part of its technology came from the Great Zay cult. The veteran then knew not to take the so-called faith in Band City seriously. It was just that. "I'm sorry for what happened just now." The veteran still wanted to express his apology, but Mr. Mo raised his hand to stop him. "Don't mind it, let's talk business." "Oh, the processing of this set of exoskeleton was done according to your instructions. The inner marrow of the Ox Demon was activated, and then redesigned and pieced together. Every piece of bone is processed according to the sample standard you gave me before. I've also worked on every piece. After going through a special process, the skeleton was dark yellow and slightly transparent. The outer layer seemed to be smeared with a layer of wax. It was oily and slightly bumpy to the touch." While he was speaking, Mr. Mo did something, but the rough skeletons hanging on the shelves creaked and let out a dense, sizzling sound. At first, it sounded like an electric shock, but later, it sounded more like a boiling liquid. Under the dark yellow wax that had been processed, one could also see the expanding and bursting bubbles. After another second, the orange flames ignited with a whoosh. Following the wax that covered the surface, the rough skeleton was completely set on fire. The flames started from underneath the wax, and the bones sizzled as they burned, as if they could crack and be destroyed at any time. If the processing of the materials was not up to standard, it could really be destroyed. The veteran stared at him. Mr. Mo had done this several times before, and each time, he would pay the full amount of the materials. Because of this, the rework made him lose face. This time, it could also be the beginning of another rework. In fact, the veteran could see from the first time that with Mr. Mo's high standards, his current apprentices could not keep up with the pace, so he had to do it himself. In total, he had been tossing and turning for almost 50 hours. It was hard to say what the result would be. The veteran had not encountered such an unconfident job for many years. Fortunately, this time, even when the flames were extinguished and the wax on the surface burned through, the bones were still intact, but they had obviously shrunk a little. There was still a layer of blood coming out of the bones. It was like the state when they were just killed and peeled off, there was still the smell of blood that had not cooled off. Mr. Mo stretched out his hands, grabbed one of the slender bones, and pulled it with force. The bones were like elastic rods. After bending, they naturally bounced back. But immediately after, Mr. Mo used the same action, and the bones turned into metal-like materials. They twisted and changed shape, twisting into an irregular strange circle. Left there, the other bones also twisted. Finally, with a flick of Mr. Mo's finger, all the bones recovered their elasticity. They buzzed and bounced back to their original state. The veteran's eyebrows twitched as he watched. After the bones went through a few rounds of processing, the elasticity and plasticity could reach this contradictory and unified state at any time. It was already very similar to some cutting-edge military rare alloys. The most important thing was that it still preserved the special activity of the mutated bones. There was a lot of research that could be done here. It was just that the strength and lifespan were unknown. After decades of accumulation and the recent hot catalysis of the deep blue walkers, the technology of the exoskeleton armor was already very mature. Although it was only a rough mold, the veteran could still see that some of the design ideas that Mr. Mo requested were mimicry transformations, which belonged to the field that he was most proficient in. The veteran really wanted to delve deeper into it, but the mundane tasks around him made him irritated. He looked at the pure and focused Mr. Mo, who was focused on examining the bones, and unconsciously sighed. "It's okay. Don't worry too much." "Oh, huh?" Mr. Mo was still examining the various indicators of the bones. He didn't turn around, but his words seemed to be exceptionally comforting. The Amaterasu cult released a silent fart and digested it in their crotch. Right now, all parties in Band City are a little confused. It's normal for the Great Zay cult to have a change of heart. Is that so? The veteran was really a little confused when he was suddenly brought up to the level of the Amaterasu cult. Speaking of which, this was the first time that Mr. Mo took the initiative to talk to him about the current situation. All of a sudden, it was so high-end that it made him a little embarrassed. So it's useless to worry. It's better to concentrate on the matter at hand. Mr. Mo obviously used the logic of a technician. This couldn't be considered comforting, but the veteran just liked this. His old and hot-tempered temper that had been honed for decades was exposed at this moment. He didn't want Mr. Mo to look down on him, so he temporarily threw away all the worries in his heart and rolled up his sleeves. "What am I worried about? I'll worry for whoever gives me money. Is there anything that needs to be adjusted? I've seen a few connecting parts, and they seem to be very crude when they were designed." The veteran rubbed his palms together and stepped forward. Whether he had really thought it through, or just mustered up a moment of anger, in short, he had returned to his previous unscrupulous state. He discussed in front of the skeleton and adjusted it, but he didn't know that Mr. Mo, who had become silent again, was paying attention to his mood, body, and even the various slight changes in his aura and magnetic field. In a way that was very difficult for him to understand. Chapter 832. Right now, many people in Band City were restless. From Luo Nan's perspective, he just lived his life as he should. There were many things to do in the last 2 or 3 days, but they weren't complicated. He even felt that things were simpler. But for other people, the feeling was completely different. 3 days had passed since Luo Nan and the True God engaged in a long-distance battle on the night of May 8th. Since then, the True God returned to Band City and threw a huge tantrum, so much so that the weather in Band City was affected. It was true that the power of extraordinaries was inconceivable, but no matter how inconceivable a True God was, he was still a living being. It was impossible for the material world to withstand the influence of the True God's emotional fluctuations. In fact, the impact on the mental plane was the most direct. It was just that the majority of the power stirred up a storm in the abyssal region. What sank into the sea of consciousness was merely the aftermath. Then there were the aftermath waves, which lasted for dozens of hours. It was more than enough for people to enjoy. This was especially true for the half-baked veteran. His bubble cage in the sea of consciousness was sturdier than that of an ordinary person, but it couldn't compare to that of a truly powerful person. He was tainted with many negative things for no reason, and they slowly sank into his heart. It was equivalent to a chronic poison. The size of the effect depended on the dosage. There would certainly be benefits in relieving the effects early. This was the result of Luo Nan's observations, but it was only a small part of the overall conclusion. Luo Nan could use some small tricks to help the veteran resolve the effects, but it was not easy to accomplish on a broader and deeper level. For example, old injuries, mutant infections, and the natural process of aging. If the veteran were to be the center, then everything would be filled with imbalances and incongruities. This old man, who had abundant experiences in the first half of his life, would gradually lose the opportunity to adjust the balance. He would endlessly consume his life force, and he would walk toward his predestined end. People still had to go through a considerable stage to experience it with their senses. But in terms of pure calculation, the feeling of seeing the answer with a glance was not too comfortable. Putting himself in Luo Nan's shoes and experiencing it on this basis, the feeling was even more difficult to describe. But Luo Nan still wanted to study. He didn't just study the veteran. He also studied the various people around him. In the end, he transformed the results of his observations into his own body, forming a conclusion. The conclusion came from him, spread to others, and returned to him. Thus, a complete chain of standards, observations, and corrections was formed. As for the standards of observation, Luo Nan had long since grasped the basic principles of matching the structure of body and soul. He had used his mother's coupling theory in conjunction with Jim Master Shio's 9 orifices 6 roots technique to gradually fumble his way out. Luo Nan possessed an extremely strong personal style. Now that he had combined it with the concept of extraterrestrial civilization described by the lamination interference technology and verified it with each other, regardless of whether it was compatible or not, it was still an experience. He set his sights higher and gradually formed an ideal outline. He used this standard to examine himself and the physical and spiritual framework of the people around him. There was no doubt that most of them, including him, were defective goods. This won't work. As expected, I still have to invest elsewhere. What? Old Hand thought that Mr. Mo was talking to him, so he turned around. Luo Nan shook his head. He just said, "There's no need to change the basic design. Can you handle the fine-tuning of the details now? Of course, the rent for this workshop is high, but the equipment is complete." There was no need to return to the factory. It would only take half an hour at most. However, I need your cooperation. Oh. Old Hand emptied his mind when it came to the field of expertise. His voice was raised by half a pitch. This toy is rough, but it's still an exoskeleton. It's also custom-made. It needs to be adjusted according to the actual situation. Mr. Mo is using it for himself, right? It's best to get on it and take a look. Makes sense. Luo Nan readily accepted the advice, even though there was a bit of difference between the actual situation and what Old Hand imagined. At this time, Old Hand was a bit hesitant. Is it convenient? Luo Nan laughed when he saw Old Hand's gaze cast at his legs. That was right. He was still a disabled person. Actually, a few days of time was enough for the replaced spinal nerves to fully integrate with his body. He didn't even sit in a wheelchair indoors anymore. When he went out, he reluctantly sat in a wheelchair for the sake of maintaining his persona. Old Hand only knew that Mr. Mo was recovering from his injuries. He was worried that it would cause a relapse. There's nothing inconvenient about it. Luo Nan took 2 steady steps and assumed a stance. He indicated to Old Hand to help him put the exoskeleton, which still had a bit of warmth, on his body. It was a simple and crude exoskeleton frame. The power and conduction devices weren't installed. It was more like a burden to forcefully put it on his body. But Old Hand was an expert in this field. Luo Nan had a good grasp of the situation. He gave it a simple test on his body and roughly understood the situation. The load-bearing spine is conservative. The flexibility can be adjusted a bit. It's fine if it's not carrying weight. If you want flexibility, the lower limbs can be adjusted. The joint design can be changed. There's no need to make such a big move. Old Hand wasn't clear on Mr. Mo's usage route, but Luo Nan was very clear on the use of this crude exoskeleton in the restoration process of the lamination interference technique. There were some functions that weren't necessary, but there were some functions that needed to be perfected. He issued an order to the window system within the external neuron, changing the projection mode from a design perspective to an experiential perspective. The virtual work area behind the workbench disappeared. Then the radiance of the projection sprinkled down on an area of several square meters with Luo Nan at the center. The radiance completely covered him, merging him with the projection area as one. It wasn't very convenient for ordinary people to use this mode. They needed to coordinate with other tools to perform self-reflection, but Luo Nan didn't need this at all. He was able to inspect and grasp the situation of his entire body just by relying on his mental senses. He also had the spare capacity to control the projection area. He carried out fine adjustments to make it conform to the material structure on the plane of reality. Luo Nan's series of operations were actually more convenient for Old Hand. Old Hand was soon able to clearly distinguish the layers of the structure from the blurred and chaotic light and shadow effects. It was as if he had received a specialized demonstration. 1, 2, 3. Old Hand counted seriously. He confirmed that Mr. Mo had consciously divided the design of his virtual work area into 3 layers. Mr. Mo himself was in the innermost layer, the core layer. The crude exoskeleton frame was in the second layer, the middle layer. The outermost layer was a virtual 3D structure drawn purely from dots of light, lines, symbols, and shadows. It was extremely complex and inexplicable. Old Hand narrowed his eyes for a long time, but he was unable to find the meaning behind it. So he tactfully shut his mouth. He no longer used his old experience to frame Mr. Mo's train of thought. He didn't know what Mr. Mo was planning in the end, but he could confirm that this definitely wasn't at the level of a deep dive simulation. Chapter 833. This must be the big shots from the inner world. I can't compete with them. I can't compete with them. Sure enough, it's more realistic for a small fry to build a shelter bit by bit. Compared to the capriciousness of the great swamp church, Veteran had a stronger resistance to the bizarre scene in front of him. After a slight fluctuation in his heart, he regained his balance. He looked at the exquisite structure that Mr. Mo had planned purely with an attitude of appreciation and knowledge. He saw that the dark red color of the skeleton due to repeated processing had become more intense. It seemed to be glowing, as if the marrow inside the skeleton had turned into a fluid that passed through the various connection points of the exoskeleton and connected them step by step. It was obvious that the aberration trait inside had been activated. Veteran was most familiar with his own work. He could see the state of the processed skeleton at a glance. While processing, the activity of the aberration trait was retained. This was the core of this set of technology, and it was also the most valuable part. Generally speaking, this reserved aberration trait existed as a stimulant. It stimulated the user's potential for a short period of time and exploded with extraordinary power. Then, the user would have to bear the corresponding risks. That minor brother of the Soul Church had half died because of this. However, the aberration trait usually took effect through infiltration and infection of flesh and blood. There was not much meaning in simply activating it. Mr. Mo, on the other hand, seemed to be using it as some kind of fuel. As for the first fire that ignited it, Mr. Mo's deeply controlled and rhythmic breathing, as well as the somewhat inflated outline of his body, formed an obvious causal relationship with it. Veteran judged that Mr. Mo had activated his physical strength, giving the skeleton a driving force, causing the aberration trait inside to ignite. It circulated and changed in the specially designed structure before being output to the outer layer. The inner layer, the middle layer, followed by the outer layer. The illusory light and shadow symbols that were presented by the projection function seemed to have become a substantial existence. The energy that was transmitted from the inner and middle layers was injected into it. It flowed endlessly along the planned structure and gradually dispersed in an orderly manner, causing the three-dimensional projection structure of the outermost layer to become more and more complex. Veteran's vision was a little blurred. He unconsciously blinked, and when his pupils focused again, the scene in front of him became even more absurd. The complex projection symbols and structure at the outermost layer gradually became blurred. To be more precise, what was blurred was the boundary between them and the surrounding space. It was as if there was some sort of fade effect, causing the projected 3D structure to fade layer by layer from the outermost edge. Energy conduction was from the inside to the outside, while fading away was from the outside to the inside. It was unknown what kind of logic was reflected in the process of changing in completely opposite directions. At this time, the most eye-catching thing was the middle-level exoskeleton skeleton. This thing also seemed to feel the contradiction between the two changes, and it seemed to be squeezed by an invisible force. Its originally relatively stable physical form also began to distort, vibrate, and sway, and the amplitude rapidly increased. Ouch! Veteran cried out involuntarily. He saw that the skeleton on Mr. Mo's body was pressing against Mr. Mo's body, but due to the limitations of the protective structure, it missed by a few millimeters. His reputation and face had almost been destroyed. In that instant of change, the low and hoarse sound of the joints rubbing against each other made one suspect that it might collapse by itself at any time. At this time, the exoskeleton was simply a bone demon that had lost control. But in just 1 or 2 seconds, the periphery of the out-of-control bone demon entered the fade effect area. Without any privileges, the exoskeleton, that was refined from the bones of the ox ghost, slowly faded and disappeared, just like the projection symbol structure. The exoskeleton was still struggling and twisting, but this weird effect process was irreversible. Fade, erase, disappear. The series of demonstrations and actions just now seemed to be some kind of special ritual that made the expensive exoskeleton complete the transformation from real to intangible, and then it disappeared without a trace. It really disappeared completely, and not even a piece of it was left. Just when Veteran almost thought that even Mr. Mo was going to be faded, the chaotic and treacherous situation came to an abrupt end. Mr. Mo let out a long breath. There were already traces of sweat on his forehead and sideburns. Obviously, the period of time just now had consumed a lot of his physical strength and energy. Not bad. It basically meets the requirements. Veteran was a little dazed, which was rare for him, until Mr. Mo called him back to reality. Master Show, there are still some small changes inside. Veteran felt as if he had just woken up from a dream. Speaking of which, it was also the first time he saw Mr. Mo's strength. It was a little difficult to jump from his first impression of a handicapped person to this channel. So he subconsciously asked a few more questions. What were you doing just now? Using absoluteness to imitate relativity, and using perfection to simulate imperfection. Huh? Oh. What I mean is that I need to enter an absolute and perfect state, but I can't reach it at my current realm. I can only use external objects and corresponding designs to magnify and improve in order to strive to achieve my goal in a limited area. Master Show, the exoskeleton you made basically meets my requirements, but there must be some minor adjustments in the design and craftsmanship. The craftsmanship can't be considered as minor adjustments, right? Veteran finally calmed down and talked about the matter as it stood, but for some reason, he felt a little diffident. The strength that Mr. Mo displayed far exceeded the upper limit of his estimation. Was this a belated show of strength? Was this a warning for the slow progress of his investment business? Veteran could not help but feel petty, but Mr. Mo was easier to talk to than he imagined. In terms of craftsmanship, I will ask another friend, and I will send you the specific suggestions later. But during this period, Master Show, you will have to prepare more raw materials. This was expected, so Veteran asked casually, how many? Based on the finished product, at least 10 or 20 sets. You are going to arm a squadron? They are expendable. Recalling the distorted appearance of the exoskeleton, before it disappeared, Veteran easily believed it. He wanted to ask for more details, but he saw Mr. Mo's expression become serious. His attention shifted, and he seemed to have picked up a certain communication. He mumbled. Sis. Half a second later, he said, yes, it's convenient. No matter what he said, his eyes subconsciously glanced at the veteran. The latter was a perceptive person. He did not say much, nodded, and quickly turned to leave so that everyone would not feel awkward. But when he was about to leave, Veteran still heard Mr. Mo's amplified voice. Chapter 834. The departing veteran didn't know that Luo Nan was still feeling a bit awkward inside the room. He had been floating outside for over 10 days since he left Xia City. Not many days had passed, but he had experienced many things. He felt as if a lifetime had passed when he suddenly received He Yuan's call. The reason why he felt this way was because He Yuan hadn't taken the initiative to contact him during this time. Actually, Luo Nan's personal wristband, hexaear, and other electronic communication devices were all placed in the underground laboratory of Gear on the North Bank. He could only sense and remotely control them through the external neuron and the soul cloak. In this way, even if he were to call someone, his location could only be set at Xia City. Of course, ever since he rode the Devil Ray to fly, this little trick was revealed. The general meaning was, I'm not in Xia City, yes, but I won't say where I am. He Yuan didn't contact him under these circumstances. This reflected her respect for Luo Nan's actions and choices. Naturally, she had her reasons for contacting him again. He Yuan's voice was calm. She didn't have any complaints, nor did she make any gestures of concern. It was as if they met every day and were having a daily conversation. Bai Xinyan left Ban City half an hour ago. She called me on the flight. Luo Nan grinned as he accepted He Yuan's calm and collected good intentions. He also acted calm, she's already left. The conversation was simple, but there were many unspoken words. Bai Xinyan knew that Luo Nan was in Ban City, and she informed He Yuan. Perhaps she wanted to give Luo Nan another warning through He Yuan. But from Luo Nan's perspective, there was no point in hiding things at this point. He naturally treated He Yuan as someone in the know. That woman really does have a talent for snitching. Did she also leak information to the Amaterasu Order? As far as I know, not yet. Really? This person's position is quite mysterious. He Yuan explained softly. Even though Bai Xinyan holds a position in Quantum Corporation, her role is similar to that of a shareholder representative. Compared to Quantum Corporation, she is quite detached. But many times, her words and actions aren't the embodiment of her own will. Then, kindness or malice? Which is her will? Luo Nan chuckled twice. Who's the shareholder behind her? Wang Yu? Deep Blue Laboratory? Apocalypse Laboratory? Or could it be Li Wei, the demon from beyond? Luo Nan didn't say the last sentence, but his opinion of Bai Xinyan hadn't lessened in the slightest. Someone who doesn't have a fixed standpoint, or someone who can't see through a standpoint, can only be more dangerous. Plus, she's always playing with this sort of thing. It's mostly due to her own vile interests. Humph. Sooner or later, she'll get out of it. He Yuan didn't need to clear by Xinyan's name. She just listened quietly. Luo Nan spoke to his heart's content, but a thought suddenly leaped into his mind. Sister Yuan, which side do you represent? Of course, he didn't ask this question, but truthfully speaking, He Yuan did indeed have a complicated background and was deeply connected to various interests. It just so happened that she was always able to maintain a relatively impartial position. Moreover, she maintained a tendency that made Luo Nan feel very at ease. This was enough. Luo Nan didn't want to be paranoid, so he quickly cut off this meaningless train of thought. He made a request out of habit. Sister Yuan, I want information on the Deep Blue world. Try to be as detailed as possible, such as the Deep Blue Laboratory and the Apocalypse Laboratory. The deeper you go, the better. If it's not easy to obtain, basic information on geography, minerals, and labor would also be fine. Also, the person in charge of the Apocalypse Laboratory is called Li Wei, right? Do you have any detailed information on him? Luo Nan couldn't help but single out Li Wei. He had aimed to gather this information, but he was limited by the Blood Flame Order's channels. The information was superficial, and he wasn't too satisfied with it. He Yuan was silent for a moment before responding. There are some confidential information that I'm not suited to provide. However, I will transmit some basic information and the corresponding catalog of information. If there's anything that you're particularly interested in, Mr. Luo, you can make an application to the government. This is because right now a portion of the information is gradually being declassified. And your relevant privileges have been rising rapidly recently. Under normal circumstances, the Star Alliance Committee won't refuse you. Luo Nan was shocked. There's such a move. Because we have to go through the process, the speed will be a bit slower. The other side will certainly get the information if we look over here. That doesn't matter. In any case, the entire world knows that we're not on good terms. Luo Nan admired He Yuan's ability to handle matters well without stepping out of the circle. He rubbed his palms together for a time, waiting to dig up Li Wei's foundation. Fine, he probably wouldn't be able to dig up Li Wei's foundation, but it would be good to clear away a layer of dirt. He Yuan asked him something at this time. How will Mr. Luo go to the Jadeite Light auction? The Devil Ray isn't a good means of transportation. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment, then he laughed. Sister Yuan, you're joking with me too. Right now, there are people who are putting on airs and watching me make a fool of myself. Why would I do what they want? You're not going. He Yuan was a bit surprised, but she soon felt relieved. She let out a sigh of relief. It's best if you don't go. I'm going. Why wouldn't I go? She clearly paused for a moment before continuing. What plans does Mr. Luo have? Cough. I haven't thought about it yet. These words seemed a bit irresponsible, but Luo Nan really hadn't thought about it yet. He wasn't naive or kind enough to believe that things would be over if he quietly seized back the 70-format laboratory and controlled the horned demons. The large amounts of equipment and information in the laboratory were still things he needed to get his hands on. Plus, it was very likely that this involved some matters of the past and relevant information that he urgently needed to understand. There was also the humiliation and threat of being toyed with in the palm of someone else's hand. This matter wouldn't be over even if he controlled 10 more horned demons. It was just that the first half of his time was focused on killing people. The second half was stuck in the external neuron, the abyss world, and the lamination interference technology. Matters like veterans and the Soul Order were interspersed in the middle, and he even exchanged a few moves with a true god. His brain really couldn't wrap itself around all of this. He was a bit confused when he heard He Yuan's question. He Yuan could understand Luo Nan's mentality. She didn't ask any more questions. She simply spoke of a plan. Her Majesty Empress Wu will go to D City next Tuesday. She will stay for a day before going to the Jadeite Light to participate in the event. This itinerary is quite reasonable. Her private flying shuttle will stop for an hour in the sea outside of Ban City. The coordinates are. If Mr. Luo is nearby, you can go meet up with Her Majesty Empress Wu. Luo Nan was a bit surprised. Her Majesty Empress Wu is participating as well? Chapter 835. Luo Nan thought that if he understood the actions of Her Majesty Empress Wu and the Xia City branch as him standing on the field to support them, wouldn't he be a bit too presumptuous? He wanted to say something, but he felt that it was hard to express himself. In the end, he just responded, I really can't decide on my side for now. Yuan wasn't surprised at all. It doesn't matter. Just let me know before 9 o'clock in the morning. Luo Nan let out a breath. Thank you, Sister Yuan. Also thank Her Majesty Empress Wu, President Ouyang, and the others on my behalf. Luo Nan asked Yuan about the recent situation in Xia City, then he ended the call. Then he sighed. The most willful time seemed to have passed. He needed to collect his thoughts. He couldn't be as unpredictable as Bai Xinyan. Speaking of which, that woman was clearly very smart. Why did she jump around so happily when it came to offending him? Oh, wait a moment. If this woman left. It didn't seem to be that simple. Luo Nan suddenly thought of something. He walked to the door and opened it. Sure enough, he saw Old Hand on the phone in the corridor outside. He was arranging the gathering of raw materials for the exoskeleton. Old Hand quickly hung up the phone when he saw Luo Nan open the door. He walked over and asked, Mr. Mo, do you have any other orders? Luo Nan thought for a moment and said, Master Shou, you guys will have to work a bit harder during this period of time. Do the preparatory work well. Once the final technological process is confirmed, we need to see the finished product as soon as possible. Of course. Also. Luo Nan felt that it wasn't too appropriate halfway through his words. He forcefully swallowed the latter half of his words back down. Old Hand misunderstood his meaning. He patted his chest and said, Our group of people is absolutely trustworthy when it comes to scheduling orders and working deadlines. We won't be disturbed by other things. I've always told the children that back in the wilderness, they needed to finish the work in their hands first even if they were to be stabbed outside. I've beaten them out of it long ago. Besides, Secretary Yin has helped us quite a bit these past 2 days. As long as Mr. Mo's conditions don't change, we'll just be wasting time with the Great Zay Order. We have several hundred people on our side. All of us are of one mind. You can be at ease. Old Hand spoke heroically, but he was actually probing Luo Nan a step further. Of course Luo Nan wanted to calm his mind. He didn't want to give him any other pressure. So he laughed and said, I naturally trust you, Master. We also urgently want to make this deal happen. How about this, I'll ask Secretary Yin to arrange a time to invite the President out for a serious discussion in the next 2 days. This is good. Although Mr. Mo didn't give a definite promise, his positive attitude was enough to satisfy the veteran. Of course, it was mostly because of Mr. Mo's magnanimous attitude during the cooperation process. That set of extremely valuable exoskeleton design plan and processing technology was taken out without any concealment. For a veteran, who was still a technician in his bones, this could show his character more than anything else. When the veteran left, his mood was completely different from when he first arrived. Luo Nan was quite happy to see Luo Nan's mood lift. But the more it was like this, the more he needed to follow up and deal with this matter. He returned to the house and sat behind the workbench. He rested his chin on his hand and pondered for a long time. Finally, he made up his mind and extended his consciousness. Where is the process at? Inside the warehouse at the passenger terminal. Captain Jimmy rushed back after receiving the news. He was still wearing a bright shirt and beach pants. He wore wooden clogs on his feet. He was completely out of tune with the atmosphere of the temporary command center, but his mentality was more positive and urgent than anyone else here. The intelligence clerk responded, "According to Captain's intentions, the operation has already been submitted. Due to the lack of a supervisor in Band City, it has already been sent to the East Asia Affairs Department. Get to the point." The intelligence clerk jumped in fright. His speed of speech instantly doubled. "The Affairs Department has already approved it. 3 out of the 5 people in the process have already signed. Only the opinions of the director and the former supervisor are left." The deputy next to him frowned when he heard this. "Captain, if this is the case, then wouldn't it fall into the hands of Manager Bai?" Captain Jimmy was quite certain. Since she has left Band City, she has separated herself from the concrete affairs. How could she have the face to compete with me, a first-line supervisor? I endured for 3 days before I sent this application. I'm already giving her enough face. Her attitude, to put it bluntly, shows that she is unwilling to take risks. Now that she has already left, what is there to fear? Besides, the others have already signed, but she is still making excuses. I have to suspect that among the group of people we want to arrest, there might be some gigolos that she is keeping behind others' backs. Captain Jimmy tore off his open-chest floral shirt. "Everyone, get to your positions. Let's try to settle this matter by tonight. We have been delayed in Band City for too long." The deep roar of the engine sounded as the giant armored airship shuttled through the vast clouds. With its huge size alone, it could deter a limited number of mutant birds living in the stratosphere and provide them with basic peace. At present, intercontinental civil aviation flights were increasingly using this type of vehicle, which was far larger and safer than large passenger planes, to defend against the threat of flying mutants. Apart from being slightly slower, there were almost no shortcomings. Of course, in the eyes of certain people, the result of the loss of efficiency was also very bad, so much so that they once again complained, "The business strategy of the airline companies is becoming more and more conservative." In this way, the military's progress in the wilderness has become untrustworthy. In the first-class cabin, on an independent seat that resembled a space capsule, Yukawa Isuk was half reclining and half leaning back. His posture was lazy, which was rare in Band City, and he only read the news to pass the time of the long journey. He had just finished reading a report about a military operation in the wilderness and casually linked 2 unrelated matters together. The main reason was that he hoped that Bai Xinyan, who was separated by the aisle, would join in the process of idle conversation. Bai Xinyan gave him face, raised her eyelids, and glanced at him. "I remember that this is a business under your name? So I have been working to promote the development of high-end aerospace business. There will be mutants in the stratosphere, and there will also be a few at the bottom of the thermosphere, but above 100 kilometers, it is still pure and safe. With the support of technology, I trust the environment there more." The corner of Bai Xinyan's mouth curled up. "Sounds like a platform for your special aerospace medal." Yukawa Isuk laughed. "No, I just feel sorry for not being able to show off the outstanding performance of my private spacecraft. Miss Xinyan, I still think that you should accept my invitation and go to the venue in a more efficient way. Compared to efficiency, safety is more important. I said, traveling with thousands of people, this sense of security is more to my liking." Yukawa Isuk glanced at the few figures in the first-class cabin. "Forgive me, in a place like this, it is really difficult to understand the feeling of traveling with thousands of people. When there is an accident, you will feel it." Not only Yukawa Isuk, but also the other passengers in the surrounding seats were surprised by this. Bai Xinyan, however, did not care at all. She immediately turned her gaze back to the projection area in front of her, supporting her cheek with her hand. Yukawa Isuk looked at Bai Xinyan's side profile, slightly lost in thought. Fortunately, his rationality quickly won over him. He looked over and saw a few words in the virtual work area, unable to hide his curiosity. That arrest order again? Chapter 836. Yukawa Isuk's eyes and ears were extremely well informed in the secular world of Ban City and most of the inner world. I heard that it involves a few hundred people from a certain Hengduan tribe. It's a little troublesome to deal with, but as long as the military and police cooperate well, it's not a big deal. Bai Xinyan answered lazily, is that so? Yukawa Isuk felt that there was more to this than met the eye. You suppressed the Tianqi operation team and didn't let them test your sword. Other than offending people, there's no benefit to it. This doesn't seem like your usual style. My usual style? Bai Xinyan glanced at him again. Looks like you know me better. Have we slept together before? Yukawa Isuk was captivated by Bai Xinyan's gaze. He didn't feel it, but he felt like his chest had been hammered and he couldn't speak for a moment. There was no way to continue this conversation. When he thought about it again, after knowing her for so many years, he really didn't understand Bai Xinyan's usual style. This woman's actions were too temperamental. That was not the right word to describe it. It was more appropriate to say that most of the time, it was impossible to tell whether Bai Xinyan was happy or angry, and the situation had already deviated in an unbelievable direction. Of course, Yukawa Isuk also knew that most of the time, Bai Xinyan did not have a choice. Some of the things she did were not of her own will, and she suffered on behalf of others. However, his ability and willpower to carry out all kinds of orders to the end without even blinking was also intimidating. Therefore, in the circle, some people called her black-hearted salt, and some even called her unscrupulous spokesperson, mocking her for being a puppet placed in front of others by powerful people, and saying that one had to be prepared to be betrayed at any time. I must be crazy, why did I want to come out with her? In fact, Yukawa Isuk understood. He gave up his comfortable private spacecraft and decided to take a civil flight with Bai Xinyan at the last minute. To put it bluntly, it was to get out of the circle of trouble in Ban City as soon as possible. It was sad to say that Ban City was his home base, but now he was running away from it as if he was fleeing from a disaster. It was an abyss of suffering, and even as the head of the Yukawa family, he couldn't bear it. As the saying went, it was easy to invite a god, but hard to send him away. He had invited the two gods from the Amaterasu cult and enjoyed the convenience they brought, so he had to bear the price. In other words, he had come uninvited. Yukawa Isuk sighed unconsciously. At the same time, he clearly heard Bai Xinyan's sigh from the other side of the aisle as well. The two sighs were strangely synchronized. This is rare. It wasn't that he sighed at the coincidence of the timing, but rather that Bai Xinyan rarely showed her emotions. He had just said that this woman was simply a cold-blooded execution machine. What was she doing now? Without waiting for Yukawa Isuk to ask, Bai Xinyan said softly, Isuk, I heard you have a lot of women outside. Are we that close? The corner of Yukawa's mouth twitched. He really wanted to do what Bai Xinyan had done just now and fight back. But the reason he provoked Bai Xinyan in the first place was because he wanted to chat with her to relieve his boredom. Then he thought about the 20-hour-long flight ahead and decided to be magnanimous. Yes, I'm ashamed that I don't have a good grasp of such relationships. As he spoke, Yukawa Isuk glanced at her from the corner of his eye, trying to figure out what this woman was up to. Do you usually use them to entertain guests? Hey. You're not going to be unreasonable about this, are you? Ahem, if you want to use this standard to judge me and consider the future of our relationship, I will be very disappointed. The topic was a little wild, but Yukawa Isuk was not a fledgling. To put it bluntly, they were just teasing each other. As a man, he could accept such an atmosphere. However, Bai Xinyan's expression looked like she was discussing a very serious topic. Even though Yukawa Aisuk did not confirm it, she continued to speak according to the established inference. Now, there is such a poor person. She followed your instructions to entertain guests and asked for something from them. But the guests found out, and it caused some trouble. Faced with the anger of the guests, what would you do, Mr. Yukawa? Oh, you don't have to answer that. Let's move on to the next question. If Mr. Yukawa was even more unlucky and reincarnated as this woman, faced with such a situation, what would you think? What would you do? Yukawa Aisuk let out a huh, but did not say anything else. Bai Xinyan smiled and did not look at the other's expression. She extended her finger, verified her authority in the virtual workspace, and prepared to sign the application. Yes or no this time? The answer is already there. Bai Xinyan was halfway through her sentence, but the rest of her words were strangely stuck in her throat. Her finger, which was already in the projection area, froze. She tilted her head slightly, trying to look across the aisle to the opposite side. However, before she could react, the voice from the other side sounded again. Before making a decision, it's never wrong to consider the consequences. Bai Xinyan's finger, which was in the projection area, subconsciously curled back halfway. You could have lived a good life, but you insisted on creating an irreconcilable situation. The way you people think is really strange. It was still Yukawa Aisuk's voice, but his words were full of admonishment and regret. There was a subtle difference from before. And that tone and speed of speech, especially the resentful and distressed tone at the end. Bai Xinyan finally aimed her gaze at the target, and what she saw was still Yukawa Aisuk's face. But on this face, the lower half of the mouth opened and closed, the lingering sound lingering, the upper half, especially around the eyes, especially around the eye sockets, was tight and twisted, almost bursting from the bulging eyeballs. Inside, there was an unstoppable sense of confusion and fear. Bai Xinyan was a little dazed. She looked at Yukawa Aisuk on the other side of the aisle. She looked at this powerful figure who could make half of Osaka shake with a stomp of his foot. He raised his right hand in an extremely stiff posture. It was as if there were invisible ropes tied around his arm. Every movement was like a bondage and pain. It took Yukawa Aisuk a full 5 seconds to place his palm on the front of his face and press it down. Bai Xinyan could already confirm that he wanted to cover his mouth, to seal his lips, teeth, and tongue, which were completely out of his control. There was no doubt that this was an extremely stupid move that would not work. But when a person suddenly lost control of a part of their body, they could only watch helplessly as they became someone else's mouthpiece. No one could say that their reaction at this moment was more sensible than Yukawa Aisuk's. With a loud slap, the palm finally landed on Yukawa Aisuk's forehead. It sealed his eyes, almost flattened his nose, but it still could not stop the mouth that was out of control. Yukawa Aisuk still spoke in a fluent voice. The method might be a little rough. I originally wanted to have a more private conversation and discuss it, but everyone's defenses are different. Bai Xinyan's mind suddenly flashed. She suddenly stood up and shouted at Yukawa Aisuk, who was still sealed by the palm and twisted face. Calm down, he can't completely control you. Chapter 837. Most of the people here were reputable people in Osaka's circle. Of course, there were some who knew Yukawa Aisuk and wanted to ask about it. Currently, other than the two people involved, the others only thought that there was an argument. On the other side, the air stewardess tried to rush to the scene, but soon, a few burly bodyguards had already overtaken her and surrounded Bai Xinyan and Yukawa Aisuk. Mr. Aisuk, you, the head of the Yukawa family's bodyguards, Kitano Sukito, rushed to the front and wanted to ask what was going on, but when he saw, Lord of Stars, Chapter 516, Upgraded, Part 1, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 838. Kitano Tsukito's reaction was very fast. The chain of clues was also very complete. However, there wasn't much of a difference between ability users and ordinary people when it came to the level of imagination. If he could think of it, then the few important people in the first-class cabin who knew the relevant information would also be able to think of it. Infrasonic wave array. The person who called out with a trembling voice was quite obvious. The person who called out wasn't brave enough. His voice was trembling and his legs were trembling. He lost his balance and nearly fell to the ground. Fortunately, someone supported him from behind, but it still caused a commotion. Kitano Tsukito swept his gaze over and recognized the identity of the person who spoke. He was a senior official of a certain department of the Sakura government. He was a well-known figure among the important people in the first-class cabin. At the very least, his words were easy to believe. Makoa, this idiot. Kitano Tsukito cried out in his mind. The people present might not know about the Cage Master, but the infrasonic wave array was a standard part of the city's defense. The degree of perception and understanding of it instantly increased. People couldn't help but think, why did the Makoa official say infrasonic wave array? Why did he have this kind of reaction? Everyone was on an airship tens of thousands of meters high in the sky. This was the information age. Even vague fragments of information could be found online. If the information couldn't be found online, they could still ask. Which of these people in the first-class cabin didn't have relatives or friends in key positions? The first-class cabin was instantly enveloped in a chaotic and extremely negative atmosphere. Phone calls were made one by one. Even if not everyone could obtain the complete information, they could still communicate with each other. A rough outline would be pieced together sooner or later. Kitano Tsukito's head split into two. From his understanding of the mental side, since Luo Nen used negative emotions to invade Yukawa Aishuk, then it was very likely that Luo Nen used the emotions of other people to carry out his plan. Wouldn't this situation be like a fish in water? Kitano Tsukito took a deep breath. He used his own face to assume an even fiercer posture. Mr. Makoa, and everyone else, please calm down. Return to your seats right now. We have the situation under control. At the very least, there were no visible intruders at the level of this group of people. No matter what you guys did to Mr. Yukawa, it has nothing to do with us. Kitano Tsukito almost punched this random person out of the airship. Fortunately, there were still some smart people here. The guy who had just said something stupid was immediately stopped, and the Vice Minister of Maikawa, who had exposed the dangerous situation earlier, was pushed to the front with a bitter face. We need to be treated humanely. The situation we're facing right now is not something we want to see. We did not interfere in the grudge between Mr. Yuchuan and Cage Master Teacher, and we do not wish to do so now. We're innocent, thousands of innocent passengers. This senior bureaucrat was quite good at handling his emotions very well. His trembling voice and body were rather contagious. So much so that two ladies started to cry. Well said. This guy who took the citizens' tax and sat in first class wasn't completely useless after all. This was one of the most appropriate negotiation methods that Kitano Tsukito could think of. Although the Cage Master often took out the infrasonic wave array and swung it around, he only pulled the trigger once, and the range was controlled. As long as they could stop this killer weapon, they would have a chance to catch their breath and even counterattack. Thinking of this, Kitano Tsukito's gaze turned to Xia Hui, who was sitting on the back of the mountain. Xia Hui was holding the Magatama tightly in his hand, and a faint light seeped through the gaps between his fingers. Was it useful? Kitano Tsukito really wanted to ask this question, but Xia Hui didn't respond. Yukawa Aishuk, who was firmly restrained in his seat, turned his gaze over and sighed. I'm clearly the victim. Kitano Tsukito's face was dark, and he didn't make a sound. Luckily, the Vice Minister of Maikawa had already gotten into character. He took the initiative to say, Mr. Luo-nan, no, Mr. Luo-nan, please consider the innocent passengers on the airship. Thousands of people, thousands of families. If anything happens, it will be an irreversible tragedy. Yes, it really is a tragedy. Yukawa Isuk's face revealed a huge, strange smile. Actually, if it weren't for you guys messing around here, would have already said goodbye and left. Mr. Scallop, are you done messing around? Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Everyone's gazes focused on the face of Xia Hui, who had been silent for a long time. But before they could ask anything, a bright light lit up in front of their eyes. It was so piercing that everyone subconsciously averted their gazes and shielded their eyes. Yukawa Isuk, who was forcefully restrained, also narrowed his eyes. But soon, he instinctively opened them, allowing the strong light to penetrate his pupils. Tears flowed from his eyes, and his body trembled. Actually, this light was good for him. The light on the material plane was projected onto the mental plane, and it turned into a dazzling sun. The heat emitted by this sun was quite compatible with Yukawa Isuk's mental structure. Everywhere the light went, there was a subtle and clear response. This way, the intruder from the outside world would naturally be exposed. Indeed, the intruder Luo-nan was partially exposed to the sunlight. In fact, if it was a simple and crude invasion from the outside, this Magatama would have automatically reacted and repelled it. There was no need for Xia Hui, who was on the back of the mountain, to stimulate it with external power. But that kind of spontaneous reaction would not be as strong as it was now, and it would have a considerable follow-up power. That's it. The corner of Yukawa Isuk's mouth twitched slightly, showing that the Magatama's counterattack was somewhat effective. Luo-nan's degree of control over Yukawa Isuk was somewhat reduced, and he really did not plan on exerting his strength a second time. Don't even think about running. The unyielding voice came from Xia Hui, who was on the back of the mountain. After the Magatama's power was completely stimulated, Xia Hui's small body seemed to have expanded by a size. His face was bright, and his facial features and 7 orifices were all connected to the Magatama's light. This was the case on the material plane. On the mental plane, the special symbolic sun, under the blessing of Xia Hui, produced even more changes. It activated certain factors within Yukawa Isuk's frame, causing it to sprout and rapidly grow into an invisible thicket of intertwining branches and leaves. The thicket could sense the changes inside and outside, and it locked onto the completely different nature of the intruder. Its roots and leaves continued to grow, like long ropes of chains, in an attempt to bind and imprison the intruder. The changes in configuration are really beautiful. The image is also very unified. Yukawa Isuk sighed in admiration. Is this a simplified version of the Fusang pure wood? On the other side, Baisinyan suddenly asked, are you from the Amaterasu order? The person she was asking was naturally Xia Hui, who was on the back of the mountain. The latter, who was controlling the Magatama, did not respond immediately. Instead, Kitano Sukido explained, Yamato was born in a family of Onmyoji masters. He later became a disciple of the Pope. In the time it took to say these 2 sentences, Yamato Xia Hui had a better grasp of the situation. He interrupted Kitano Sukido with a clear voice, I will lock onto the intruder's position and immediately contact the radar or satellite positioning system. He can't be too far away from here. Baisinyan frowned while Kitano Sukido's eyes lit up. In fact, he had a belly full of anger right now. If he could find Luo-nan's position and Luo-nan had a missile launch button in his hand, he would press it without hesitation. Don't complicate things. Baisinyan hesitated for a moment before advising Kitano Sukido, he's already retreating. This is just a warning. Just? Kitano Sukido's eyes were as sharp as knives. Miss Baisinyan, the Yukawa family respects your opinion, but we hope that you can respect our profession. If that person can come once, then he can come a second time and a third time. You guys can't do anything to him. In the vast Pacific Ocean, at an altitude of 10,000 meters, how were a bunch of ordinary people going to deal with the powerful ability users who were riding the flying devil rays that were several times faster than the speed of sound when they were riding on civilian airships that seemed stable but lacked countermeasures? You guys can't do anything, but that doesn't mean that the order can't. Mountainback Xia Hui responded. He turned his head and used a cold and arrogant gaze to cut across Bai Xinyan's face. Unrelated people, please keep your distance. Don't interfere with my casting. At this moment, Mountainback Xia Hui naturally became the person in charge. Even Kitano Sukito had to give in to him a bit. Because at this moment, Mountainback Xia Hui was no longer just an external bodyguard. He represented the stance of the Order of Amaterasu. Bai Xinyan raised her eyebrows. Your Yukawa family is willing to be the bait. Kitano Sukito's expression was very ugly. As the head bodyguard, he felt that his authority had been violated. But it was useless to say anything now. Mountainback Xia Hui's mouth was already flowing with a mysterious and incomprehensible incantation. The incantation buzzed in the half-sealed space. Yukawa Aishuk was still squirming with his crooked and twitching mouth. He complained, "Why do you keep looking up? The order of justice doesn't do this. Is this the difference between the order of ideals and the order of gods?" Some of the people present understood these words, some did not, and some pretended not to understand. In short, no one responded. Kitano Sukito and the group of bodyguards stared at Yukawa Aishuk's body. Xia Hui continued to chant his incantation, while Bai Xinyan continued to retreat quietly. At this moment, Yukawa Aishuk's eyes followed her and locked onto her position. He transmitted the attention and pressure hidden behind the layers of clouds and the void. Maybe everyone should be open and honest for once. Soldiers are soldiers, generals are generals. Even if we can't negotiate, we can still fight. My words may be a little childish, but it's really boring for you to keep knocking on my door like this. Bai Xinyan had a bitter smile on her face, but she had already made up her mind not to speak. She had a strong premonition that the less she spoke now, the less trouble she would have in the future. If she could survive this escalating situation, seeing that Bai Xinyan was refusing to cooperate, the other side looked a little depressed. Forget it. Maybe I shouldn't have come today. I'll find a more suitable method next time. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.